Just give me a heads
Okay,
up.
we
Oh,
are live.
there we go. Hi, everyone.
What were you about to say?
I was going to say, give me a heads up so I don't have my last bite into the microphone.
Oh, the heads up was when I said ready to go live, and you said yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes it takes a while.
No, I had it all set up. I'm ready to go.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us live. Brian's just what are you eating there? What's your last minute? Is it like fettuccine Alfredo? I know a lot of NHL players like to have fettuccine before for a game.
Yeah, no, I don't carb load the same way NHL players do.
So what was it?
It was some cauliflower with kale and chickpeas
Okay.
on like a bed of labneh. Or no, wait. Yes.
I like labneh.
Labneh. Yeah.
Very good.
It was really good.
Sounds great. Did you make that
It's a new one
yourself?
in our household.
Wow.
No, I did not make this dinner.
Did someone in the household make the dinner, or was this a ordered dinner?
No, this is made in the
Wow,
household.
so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I'm fueled up and fired up.
that's good.
Can't you tell?
I feel like I need to eat a little bit before a show, otherwise I'll be like maybe burping a little bit or something during. But I guess for you, that's not a concern. I guess if you're having like maybe not the most burpy food.
So. I mean, I don't know how much food makes you burp.
If I'm like talking and like being active, I don't know. Maybe my like
I generally finish eating during the start of the show. Like while you say yes, I'm usually having my last bites.
Oh, okay. I couldn't hear what you're saying. I hear a lot of banging right now.
Sorry, I'm just getting my stuff in position.
Okay. I guess when I said, "Are you ready to go?" I guess you could have said no. When I was like, "Are you ready to go live?"
The thing about me is that I'm always ready to go.
I mean, I guess it depends how you. Okay, so let's start the recording and we can get this going. Thanks so much to everyone who joined us here. Ben, Edward, Josh always drops. When did Josh even write that? There's no like timestamps, but he wrote Best Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It's always here when I come in, and I was here like 10 minutes early.
Best Fantasy Hockey Podcast listener ever.
Oh, that's nice.
How about that?
Touch. I mean, I don't know if we just want to give that out just like that.
I mean, definitely like one of the nicest, the most gracious.
Well, yeah. So there's different metrics, I guess.
Yeah.
We should have an award show.
I think Josh is the Best Fantasy Hockey Podcast live YouTube opening commenter.
Okay, well.
How about that?
So.
And I'd be willing to go further.
Let's see, Josh, this is your moment, right? Like Brian is open to going further, and now you have to push him over the edge. So, Brian, want to start the recording now?
Push me over the edge before Elon does.
Whenever you're ready.
Push me over the happy edge.
Just let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, record.
Done.
Oh, man. I definitely did not do this as fast as I want. Record on this computer. Okay. I'll fix that in post.
Thank God.
So, all right, got a big show today. Lots to get through. Yeah, the lady being of podcast listeners. We should do a full award. Oh, I made a bet. Oh, I'll say that in our.
Oh, that's a good one.
About betting. Did I tell you my bet that I made, Brian? I posted it on Discord, but you might have been away that day.
No. Oh, I saw you share. I saw you writing about it. It was a Ty Smith Rookie of the Year.
No.
Okay.
I bet on the.
It was Draisaitl, Art Ross.
Yeah.
Okay.
Crazy odds. Insane.
What are the odds?
It was like 7.5 to 1. I put down. I'll tell you and the listeners. I put down $150.
Wow.
And it's I think it's a 50-50, not 50-50, right? Because someone aside from Draisaitl or McDavid could win. I guess McKinnon could win, but I'd say it's like should be like 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 at best. I just felt like I wanted to take that action. I always like to do one bet a year. I decided this year not to bet on the cup winner because I always get that wrong. So anyhow, all right, I'm ready to start the show if you are, because I see you're so fascinated by this part.
Let's do it.
What should I say as my joke? Hosted by two guys should make a reference to Tony D'Angelo, who are a week into our contract with Blue Wire and still haven't been waived. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Are we a week in or 2 weeks in? I guess we're 2 weeks in.
2 weeks in.
Okay. I hear like a buzzing. Oh, is that your fan just turned on?
Probably just my fan.
Okay.
Do you want to capture the sound now?
Sure. Oh, Edward's on the edge of his seat for the announcement. We're saving it to the end of the show, just to be really mean. Okay.
What's the announcement?
Brian, you know what it is. Okay.
I feel like, okay.
Was that a joke?
Well, let me check our notes. Is there something I'm forgetting? Oh no. Why is it at the end of the show?
I asked before we started recording, I was like, I'm thinking we'll like tease it and we'll bring up the end of the show. And you're like, okay.
I thought you said throughout the show.
I said throughout the show, we'll tease that we have an announcement.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's why we come on 10 minutes before. I like break down ideas ready to go. And then you say, okay. And right before I'm about to start, you throw me a curveball. Keep me on my toes.
All right.
All right. Yeah! Yes! Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest-running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who started our contract with Blue Wire 2 weeks ago, and we are yet to have been waived. I am your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me, as always, the poobah of prognostication, the IPP MVP, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast that keeps its problematic per 60 down to a very reasonable level. We are so excited to be live and here with you again for another episode where we get to break down all that fantasy hockey had to offer us this week, all the news and notes, so that if you had a crummy week like I did, you are prepared to bounce back for next week. And hey, if you had a great week, then you can just keep on rolling. If hopefully you listen to the rest of this show and get some really good tidbits that'll help you on your way to winning your next week.
Yeah, we've got a packed show for you today, so we'll see how long it takes us to get through it. But I got a set for you. Okay, we got outjuries, we got injuries, we got hot streaks, we got cold streaks, and we have a player who was just waived from his team. We're gonna get to all that in just a second, but first, a couple announcements. Of course, we want to always mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com, proudly so, the #1 fantasy hockey website in the world. I'm there every day, reading the articles, making sure I'm up to speed on everything. I love the daily ramblings, plus frozen tools. Mwah, like the perfect stats site to get everything you need to prep a hockey podcast or to do well in fantasy. So that's at DobberHockey.com. Brian, we also have another big announcement, which I think the plan is to kind of tease it and save it all the way to the end of the show. So stay tuned till the end, because we've got a huge announcement for the people who are participating in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League specifically. You're going to want to hear this. And even if you're not, you're still going to want to hear this. It's going to be big.
I'm biting my tongue. The people who play in the cupful are amazing and competitive and fun. And they give so much to us in the league. I want to give it to them right away. Why make them wait?
All right, fine. Do it. I don't know. Okay.
Okay. If you want it, look in the show notes right now and you'll see.
Okay. So with that,
look if you want to be spoiled.
Let's get started with our content here, because like I said, we have a lot to get to. And of course, the big news from today, we're recording this Sunday evening. A couple NHL games have happened. A couple are wrapping up. We got Dallas, Carolina in overtime. But yeah, we've got a lot to get to. And number one, like I said, player got waived. Tony DeAngelo, the fourth leading scorer of defensemen last year for the New York Rangers, had a rocky start to this season, right? Like he played, I think, the first game, then he got benched for a couple of games, apparently because he took a bad penalty or something, or who knows, for whatever reason. Then he came back. He had been bumped from his top power play spot. Then over the last couple of games, he got back on the top power play, actually picked up a power play assist in Saturday's game versus Pittsburgh. And then all of a sudden today, out of nowhere, he's waived. Brian, I picked him up in the couple. He got dropped by Lewis from the short shifts. And I thought, I'll throw a buck. I'll pick up DeAngelo. Could be a top power play guy. He got back on the top power play. Like I said, like I was feeling pretty good with the ad. Like I'm not a huge Tony DeAngelo fan, don't get me wrong, but if he could help me on my fantasy team, why not? Now, all of a sudden, the dude's waived. I was kind of thinking of just messaging you and being like, should we just postpone the show for a day? Because obviously we'll find out tomorrow if he's going to get claimed or not. So maybe you're listening to this and already know. In the meantime, I'm just wondering like what this means, like especially in terms of fantasy. Do you just kind of like drop this guy because, you know, he might go to another team, he might not. Even if he does, he's going to have to quarantine, and who knows if he'll be good, or like if he doesn't get claimed, and are the Rangers sending him down? Like, Brian, I'm just trying to decide, like, do I just like drop him like he's hot, like the Rangers did, or do you think this potentially could be good for his fantasy value? Like, I'm just imagining best case scenario. What if he goes to the Bruins and takes over on the top power play as the quarterback? All of a sudden, he's like as good as he was last year. I know there's obviously a lot of like non-hockey implications here, so I'm sure you're going to want to get into that. But also, I'm very curious to get your fantasy take on what this means with Tony DeAngelo being waived.
Sure. So for anybody who just hasn't heard the full story yet, Tony DeAngelo apparently has been in trouble. I mean, okay, so he has this history, like going back. I actually have this article up from 2014 right now by Sunaya Sapurji, who wrote in 2014 on Valentine's Day that Anthony D'Angelo was suspended for a slur directed at a teammate. And like we've known this to be true about Anthony D'Angelo, who has never been afraid to be mean to other people and to use slurs and to not seem apologetic about it, and to have had a couple chances to reform. Like, he was drafted into the NHL. There's a quote from Steve Yzerman circulating now that said, like, we knew his background. We wanted to give him a chance. He might have done something stupid. And then, of course, after being drafted into the NHL, he was tossed out of the Tampa organization within 2 years, then lasted less than 2 years in Arizona before the Rangers took him on, where apparently there have been regular problems. I mean, if you're on Twitter or plugged in at all to, I guess, anything hockey, like about stuff that's happening off the ice and on the ice, you'll see that he's sort of, brought a lot of negative attention to himself for saying some pretty awful things, and has been met with I don't know how far I want to go here. Okay, by saying some pretty awful things that are not. I'll pause so you have an easier edit. From saying some pretty awful things that go beyond awful. Like, awful is not a fair word to describe them, and probably it's not a good idea to have anybody who's doing these things regularly and not trying to make any effort to improve in the league. And I guess this is what the Rangers have finally decided, that they've had enough. And apparently it was an altercation where the latest we've got Carpinello, I think his first name is Rick, on The Athletic, and Adam Herman over at Blue Shirt Banter, who are sharing the most information that I'm picking up right now. That there was an altercation after the loss against Pittsburgh on Saturday, where he might have said something to Alexander Georgiev, and then Chris Kreider punched him in the face, and then he was promptly waived. There's also this story out right now that he took K'Andre Miller's first goal puck and kept it, like would not give it to him. So look, all of this is just like being dished right now. It's all live. I'm sure everybody will know more in 24 hours. But the reason I'm bringing all this up, because you asked me about his fantasy value, and I think there's a connection here. I think this is somebody who has burned possibly his last chance of playing in the NHL. It's pretty wild to me that like he had most of this history was already there. Like, there's no surprise coming from, I think, the last week or month or year or 3 years even about who this guy is, aside from the fact that he hasn't changed for the better. And yet the Rangers signed him to a 2-year contract worth almost $5 million each year back in October. If they don't want him, I think other teams will know that and aren't going to easily take a problem off their hands. So no, I don't think another team just goes ahead and claims D'Angelo. I also don't know that he gets another chance in New York. So for me, I see the biggest implication here is being like, it's Adam Fox season completely. They were sharing time on the top power play. Like, they were both playing on it for a little bit. And I just think now it's just going to be Adam Fox's top unit to run, which is exciting for anybody who already has him. And I'm not holding my breath that Anthony D'Angelo is going to get another chance in New York or elsewhere, anywhere or anytime in the near future. So is that enough of a fantasy take for you, Elon?
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying you're pretty confident. And obviously, we don't know with 100% certainty, but you're pretty confident he's not going to play again, which means if you have Tony D'Angelo on your team, maybe it's time to drop. I guess you can wait a day if you want, see what happens, but start planning ahead. And yeah, this is, I guess, good news for Adam Fox. He was already there. Also good news for whatever forward is going to get back on the top power play, right? Because they've been running 3 forwards and 2 defensemen for the last couple of games. And it was Zibanejad, Panarin, and Buchnevich on that top power play with D'Angelo and Adam Fox. So notably absent Chris Kreider and Ryan Strome. And both of those guys have actually been big, like, busts to start the year. They both only have 3 points in 8 games so far. And obviously it was concerning that they were both bumped from the top power play. Actually, Chris Kreider was even bumped to the 3rd line in that game against Pittsburgh on Saturday. So now I don't know, just another reason to potentially hold on to these guys. But I was curious to get your take on these slumping Rangers. There's another huge slumping Ranger, which we'll get to in a sec. But first, like, I guess the hors d'oeuvres before the main course, Ryan Strome and Chris Kreider, are these the types of guys that you'd be nervous about? Or are you just assuming that they're going to get back to at least what they were doing last year or close to? I know like Ryan Strome overperformed a little bit, but if he's centering Artemi Panarin, like how bad can he be? Hopefully not this bad.
For sure. And I'm going to get to that in a sec. Sorry, I just like had another thought that
Please.
connects with why I don't think D'Angelo is going to get another chance. And it's that, if you're going to be awful and make all kinds of like mistakes and like be mean, you're going to have to be like really good at what you do. And I just want to like make the point here that like NHL teams have shown they will excuse a lot of behavior that should not be excused in the name of like, yeah, this guy's a member of our team. He's a positive contributor to that. And the rest of the stuff we'll deal with. And it looks like the Rangers were ready to do that up until this point. And like, I'll emphasize that Tony DeAngelo on the ice has been hot garbage on defense, right? He had this offensive upside, which was great for him last season, but in a year where it seems like the Rangers are trying to play more structured, more disciplined, his game is exposed even more so. So if he doesn't have that amazing game to want to make and to make NHL teams want to make excuses to keep him around despite knowing who he is at his core and the way he's treated other people using like racist slurs, then I just don't see it happening. So like that's another reason why I don't see him coming back to the NHL. I could be wrong. Like this is so fresh and you shouldn't get your news from us on this. Definitely keep an eye out on Rick Carpinello at The Athletic and Adam Zedherman at blueshirtbanter.com. But that's just another reason why I'm sort of poo-pooing the notion that DeAngelo comes back, just because like I just don't think his play has made him worth any kind of trouble, even though we know that NHL teams will tolerate some amount of trouble. But you asked me about slumping Rangers.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying also is if a team does claim him, you definitely want to be following us on Twitter to see all of Brian's angry and probably very cutting tweets tomorrow. So that'll be fun, a fun bonus.
I have made no cutting tweets today, and I don't plan to make any cutting tweets tomorrow. I think I've said like what needs to be said. I've tweeted before. I don't know that I have much to add, and there's room for other people with more to say to say it. So you asked me though about the slumping Rangers.
Chris Kreider and Ryan Strome.
Okay.
The two guys. So 3 points in 8 games. They were off the top power play. Someone might get back on, but is that reason enough to not totally panic about them?
Yeah, it is reason enough to not totally panic about them. And one reason, again, is because if Tony DeAngelo really is out of the picture, there's room for another forward on that top power play unit. Even odds on whether it goes to Kreider or Strome or even Lafreniere, probably not Capo Caco in the picture right now. But one of these guys is probably going to get bumped back up to the top power play unit. So you're going to want to keep an eye on that. As for Kreider specifically, I'm not panicking yet about him playing on the third line. Remember, he's with Zibanejad and Buchnevich all year before being bumped to the third line for like one game. And as you said, Elon, they lost that game. So like we knew going into this season that there's going to be a lot of fluidity in that Rangers depth chart. So on that side of things, I'm not too worried about him moving around the lineup. Like this was going to happen. That said, that doesn't explain all of Kreider's challenges this year. He's seen a huge drop in offensive rate stats, and he's done 1 minute a night at 5-on-5. So he's lost ice time because I think the Rangers are trying to play a more balanced top 9 rather than being limited to just 2 lines that they could roll consistently last season. And then Zibanejad, did you ask me about him yet?
No.
Okay, so you can just jump in before I said, and then Zibanejad.
I don't know if that's an easy edit point.
I think it is.
Well, can you just say your last sentence again?
Okay. And then he's down 1 minute a night at 5-on-5 too, which isn't helping, but that's probably because the Rangers are rolling more of a top 9 this year rather than having been limited to rolling only a top 6 last year.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you're saying let's hang on a little longer. Kreider like seems to do this also, right? Like every season, I feel like he has really cold stretches and then he gets super hot. So if he does get dropped in your league and you really want to wait till he starts producing again, make sure you're going to be quick on that trigger, because he could easily go on like a run of like 15 points in 15 games or something. We see this like every single year. But yeah, like I said, I wanted to talk about Strome and Kreider as the hors d'oeuvres, and the main course is Brian Mika's advantage at holy cow. To me, the biggest disappointment of the season so far. I know we're only a couple weeks in, but man, he's now pointless in 5 straight games. I'm really hoping that maybe, I don't know, I'm grasping here, right? Like maybe like waving D'Angelo, like getting this mess out of the way, hopefully can clear the way for things to maybe reset and get back to next year. Though we've been talking to Short Shifts Ben, and he, as a big Rangers fan, he thinks that Zibanejad's playing hurt, and maybe he just isn't capable of being the Zibanejad from last year, which really freaks me out because he's supposed to be a cornerstone of my Cupful team. So Brian, I'm scared. Help me feel better. Is Zibanejad going to get back to what he was last year?
So I can't make you feel better based on what's immediately in front of me about Mika Zibanejad. I said how Kreider was down 1 minute a night at 5-on-5. Zibanejad is down 90 seconds a night at 5-on-5, which is a pretty substantial drop when it's matched by a really startling drop in rate stats too for Zibanejad. Like, he is not playing the same way he was playing last year. And I mean, you guys have heard Ben on Short Shifts yelling, for lack of a better word, about what is all going wrong with the Rangers and why nothing's working out. And I just pinged him today to get his thoughts. And Ben mentioned that, there's less line stability in New York right now without Jesper Fast in the lineup, and now Philip Hedel's injured. So that might be hurting Zibanejad and Kreider and company. I guess I still am not directly mentioning Strome, but Strome too. Also, Ben seems to have this theory that Zibanejad is playing injured, which I don't really know what the basis of that is. It would be a really strange choice for the Rangers to be playing Zibanejad while he's injured at a time where it doesn't seem that critical for their long-term success that Zibanejad plays, or even short-term success. Like, of course, he's a big part of the team, but man, if he's a big part of the team, I want him healthy for years and years and years to come. And I'm okay if he takes some time to heal and get back to 100%. Ben also mentioned that there's a new defense group in New York this year. Like, there's been a lot of changes on the blue line. And with that comes adjustments with the forward group, and things aren't always as smooth in terms of communication between defensemen and forwards and chemistry. So there are lots of reasons to wonder, or to at least think that there are things happening in New York that can be fixed. Like, they're just temporary. Like Zibanejad and Kreider's rate stats, I don't expect them to wallow at the depths they're at right now. I expect them to bounce back. It's just a matter of why it's happening. We don't have a firm answer. And so we can't really say when it's going to go back. My theory from the start of the season was that the Rangers were shifting, and it goes back to their decision to bench D'Angelo initially, is that they had this mentality last season, which was like, okay, we're going to do, like, this is working. It's not perfect, but we're going to deal with it because there's not a whole lot else we have going for us. And there's not a whole lot else we want to work towards. But now I think this year, their mentality is more like, hey, we're building that structural foundation that we're going to base our style of play on for the future. And we know David Quinn has shown himself to be pretty hard-headed about the style that he wants his players to play, and the way we've seen him treat like Kako last year, who deserved it. But anyway, just saying, like, I feel like there's less room for play and more rigidity in that Rangers structure. And maybe they're just climatizing and getting used to it. And it's just going to take another couple of weeks. Like, I still just attribute this to early season growing pains and adjustments for the Rangers. Of course, it's that much more painful to watch if you have any of these guys on your roster in a short season where, a matchup that would normally be one of 22 matchups is now one of 13 matchups before you get to the fantasy playoffs. So I know there's this heightened sense of urgency when things aren't going well, but we're still only like 9 or 10 games into the season. And I would preach patience if you can't sell these guys off for something similar enough to what their draft value was back on draft day.
Right, yeah, because we're going to get to a bunch of hot streak guys, right, where, like, I'm going to be asking you about Tyler Toffoli and Vincent Trocheck and, like, I don't know, Carter Verhaeghe even, like, all of these guys are outperforming Zibanejad right now. So I guess the flip question will be is if you try to, like, get Zibanejad with one of your hot players, which I think in a normal season would be obvious, but in a shortened season like this, you do kind of wonder, like, should I just, like, stick with the guy who's hot? Because before we know it, it's going to be the fantasy playoffs, in a couple months, potentially 2-3 months. So it's scary, but okay. At least I feel a little better that I agree with you. Like he's still shooting, right? So if a couple of more of these pucks just went in the net, if he had a bit of luck, then all of a sudden, we wouldn't be as concerned. So I'm definitely giving him more time, and I'm probably going to give him the rest of the season. But I really am looking forward to last season Zibanejad to come back to my team.
Yeah, I just want to underline, like you're saying, if he just had a little bit of luck, it wouldn't look so bad. You're right. If he just had like average luck, though, which as far as I can tell, he's not far off that. He still would not be performing up to the standard you expected on draft day. Like, he looks worse. Things are bad for Zibanejad so far. I can't sugarcoat it.
Fair. Okay, so let's just move on. Let's sugarcoat this. Anyone who drafted David Pastrnak late in their fantasy drafts because, he fell because of that injury, they are partying now because of Pastrnak super early, right? He was scheduled to come back mid-February originally when he had that surgery. What is it now? It's not even, you're probably listening to this on February 1st. So like over 2 weeks in advance potentially. And Pastrnak returned for the Bruins for that overtime loss to the Washington Capitals on Saturday. Obviously he got on the score sheet. I'm even surprised he only got 1 point, right? He assisted on Charlie McAvoy's tying goal with a minute left in the third. He also took 5 shots. Obviously he went right to the top line, top power play. So, I mean, nothing really to say here. Get Pasta in your lineups. He's going to be amazing because he's David Pastrnak. But I think this is interesting because now we could take a look at the top power play because obviously someone was stepping in and taking his place. And Jake DeBrusk is day-to-day with a lower body injury. And according to Frozen Tools, it was Nick Ritchie on that stacked man advantage unit with the big 3 forwards and Charlie McAvoy, who we'll get to in a second, for the majority of the power play time on Saturday's game. And looks like there was also some time where David Krejci bumped McAvoy and there were 5 forwards on the top power play. So Marchand, Pastrnak, Bergeron, Krejci, and Nick Ritchie. And actually it was at that time when they were playing with 5 forwards, they scored a goal. And it was Nick Ritchie who scored that power play goal. So I don't know what's going to happen with that power play, but it seems like at least for the short term, Nick Ritchie is going to be there. And Nick Ritchie's goal yesterday was his 7th point in 8 games for the Bruins this season. And also he's getting like pretty decent even strength deployment, right? He's on the second line with Krejci. It's basically the best you could get on the Bruins because that top line is set in stone. So are we at a point where like Nick Ritchie would be a really good stream if he's available for at least as long as Jake DeBrusk isn't there? And even if Jake DeBrusk comes back, like, is he really going to take Nick? Like, Jake DeBrusk has never produced when given an opportunity on the top power play. Nick Ritchie seems to be crushing it. Obviously, like, this could be like 2 weeks from now, we'll like even forget that we had talked about Nick Ritchie, but right now it would be really hard for me to leave him in free agency if I had a struggling player on my team.
I totally hear that. And I want to talk about Nick Ritchie in a second, but I also want to take this opportunity to do a bit of a post-mortem on the Bruins without Pastrnak and see what happened, right? Because we were really eager to see what this team would look like with Pastrnak out of the lineup, who would get an opportunity, who would actually capitalize on it. And it was Jake DeBrusk and Jack Studnicka who combined for 2 points in a combined 12 games, just a point apiece in their opportunities as top line right winger in Boston, which is just bizarre, right? Like, how could you do nothing from that spot from 2 guys? I shared a take actually on Discord inspired by this failure of anyone to do anything who wasn't Pastrnak, that I worry if you're in a dynasty league that Boston's drafting mistakes are going to catch up to them really fast as Bergeron and Marchand and Krejci sunset towards the end of their careers. You're getting a small taste already of what Boston looks like post-dynasty with the departure of Krug and Chara. Though also, to be fair, Boston is probably adjusting to that absence, and maybe we can't judge them completely on what they look like at this point. But all that said, I know we've talked about in the past guys like Jeremy Swayman and Dan Vladar, who might be great dynasty pickups as potential future goalies for Boston. If you have them in your dynasty, I don't think it's an awful idea at all to sell them while the team is still competitive. I'm not sure I like the long-term outlook there at all. And that does relate back to my thoughts on Nick Ritchie, who absolutely deserves a shout out for taking Pasternak's spot as the 3rd most productive forward in Boston while Pasta was on the shelf. He scored 4 times on 18 shots, so his shooting percentage was greater than 20%. However, 4 of those goals came on the power play. He had 6 power play points, and that's over 8 games, which is great. So we can forgive a slightly higher shooting percentage, or a much higher shooting percentage than we'd expect, because he is scoring these goals on the power play. That said, this is the first we're ever seeing of this from Nick Ritchie. He's already got a career high in power play goals and the second highest power play total in his career with those 6 power play points in 8 games. He's 3 points shy of his career high 9 power play points in a season. So like, what do we expect from him going forward, and why are we suddenly seeing this? Well, you look at what's changed from last year when he was in Anaheim. So now he has an upgraded power play role in Boston. Plus, he upgraded in centerman from Adam Henrique to David Krejci at 5-on-5, which he hasn't really made the most of yet. But that's still good news. It's good news to play with David Krejci. We actually liked Nick Ritchie and talked about him semi-regularly on the show a few years back as a guy who had some potential, but then he never got the opportunity. At some point, we assumed he just wasn't getting opportunities because he wasn't good enough to earn them. But now Nick Ritchie's seeing a career high time on ice, the best center he's ever played with, top power play role, and 7 points in 8 games. These are all reasons to give Ritchie another chance as at least a streamer on your roster. Am I expecting a ton of production at 5-on-5, given that he has just 1 5-on-5 point so far this year? No, I'm not. Am I open to it? Yes, because David Krejci. So he's not a guy that I'm like desperate to go and rush out for, especially because he could lose that top power play spot. But if you're looking for a couple bottom roster pieces to try out this week in a league that's about, 200, 250 players deep, Nick Ritchie qualifies as a reasonable option for a streamer so long as he's on the top power play in Boston.
Yeah, like he's top power play, and it's like on the top power play, like in the league, one of the best ones out there. So it's definitely a spot you want. Another thing I took from everything you said there is you freaking love David Krejci, right? You came like David Krejci, this guy who's like in free agency in all of my leagues, and no one is adding him. And you're talking about how like Nick Ritchie, like he definitely still could do something at even strength because he's playing with David Krejci. I'd love to see David Krejci do something actually, but I won't even bug you about
David Krejci. So what point pace do you think he had last season?
Like 50, 60?
60-point pace. The season before, 74-point pace. Every season for the last decade plus, he's been somewhere between 55 and 75 points. One of the top assisters in the NHL. I've been through this.
Yeah, I know. We've done
this. The last decade. Right now, he has 6 points in 8 games. Sure, he doesn't shoot a ton, a couple shots a game, no peripherals, but he's also on the top power play. He's also seeing a huge bump in ice time compared to the past few years in Boston. And the thing with him is he's never been that relevant. And I know you didn't want to get me going on David Krejci, but you asked for it. He's never had anyone to play with on the second line. And so he hasn't gotten the credit he's deserved for having been as productive as he has been from line 2 for as long as he has been. And I have always wished, I've always thought, I've given up on Jake DeBrusk because he's not doing anything with David Krejci. I'm hoping against hope that Nick Ritchie will. But are you telling me that if nobody can do anything with David Krejci, then maybe David Krejci is the problem?
I'm not saying anything like that. It's just, I don't care. I know he's had a great career. He's good.
You know better than to challenge me on David Krejci.
Anyway, I'm into Ritchie. If Ritchie and Krejci were both available in a league that was multi-category, Krejci's assists every, 2 out of every 3 games isn't doing it for me. And I would definitely go with Ritchie for now. But obviously not like I'm saying he's going to be a season-long hold and he's a sure thing, but he's a great free agent. And we're going to be talking about a lot of players who are in good positions on their teams, some that not doing as well as Nick Ritchie has been doing. So maybe we could keep a little running tally, which I always say and then forget. But let's quickly talk about this top power play, right? You said Krejci's on the power play. So he was for a bit of the last game. He also wasn't for a bit when Krejci wasn't there. So Matt Grzelcyk is injured, right? So that's the main story here. I think the Bruins' plan is to have Grzelcyk quarterback in the top power play. He's been doing that job every game that he's been healthy, but unfortunately that's been tough for him. He already missed time earlier just this past week. Then he came back on Thursday, got injured again. So who knows when he'll be back this time. In the meantime, I was thinking, all right, it's Charlie McAvoy time. Finally, we've been waiting for it. And right away they go to this 5-forward situation. Still, McAvoy is doing well. He had a goal and an assist on Saturday, a power play point in each of his previous 3 games before that. So it's not as if McAvoy's not doing very well. He's up to 7 points in 8 games after going pointless for the first 4 games of the season. So that just goes to show how good he's been in this last week. I don't know what to ask now. I was going to ask, is it time to consider McAvoy a top end D-man, right? Because if he's on this top power play, the same one that we're talking about is so great for Nick Ritchie, but McAvoy, as we know, has already been great at getting points at even strength. Now I guess there's this little asterisk. I almost wonder if that's just a great opportunity to buy a little lower right now than you would have to, because you could say, oh, look at this Roto World post about how the Bruins are trying 5 forwards on the power play. Because like I've never seen a team stick with this for more than a game or two, and we've seen some examples throughout the year. So maybe this will be the first time ever that a team sticks with 5 forwards on the power play for more than a game, but I wouldn't bet on it. So, and with Grishlik having all these injury issues, I think McAvoy is primed. He's already doing it. Like, I think he's primed to have a huge breakout season, and I'd be trying to get him if I could.
For sure. Yeah. I don't know. I have much more to add. I don't think you're going to find a really great buy low window because the Bruins rolled 5 forwards on the power play. We already know also that anyone who rosters McAvoy is probably already like pretty pleased with him. He's already pretty valuable thanks to great peripheral numbers, or I should say good peripheral numbers, with that 45 point potential, even off the top power play. On the top power play, you can bump your expectations to be up above a 50-point full season pace. Of course, my hunch is still that McAvoy doesn't hold this role once Grishlik returns, but we also don't know when that'll be at this point. Of course, all the stuff that we don't know, like the Rangers situation and now Grishlik's injury, you can listen to Short Shifts, 2 episodes in the middle of the week. They'll fill you in.
Yeah, great job, Ben and Lewis, on the short shifts. I've been enjoying it. And yeah, McAvoy, it's like a fun season this year. One thing I like is all these new top power play defensemen that we've been waiting for. So like McAvoy's getting a shot, Aaron Ekblad getting that shot over in Florida, like Adam Fox on the Rangers. Like we've been waiting for some new blood in these spots, and finally we're seeing how they do. And so far, like all of them seem to be doing pretty well. So, okay, let's take a quick break right now. Let me just put edit point here. We're gonna do the ad for Underdog. Should we do first the pause and then Underdog, or do you want to do Underdog and then the pause?
Let's do Underdog and then the pause.
Let's do a quick break right now. And thank one of the sponsors for this week's episode of Keeping Karlsson, which are our friends over at Underdog. We've talked about it for the last couple of weeks. Underdog is freaking awesome. Like, if you like fantasy hockey and if you like playing fantasy hockey for money, then you need to check out Underdog because they've got it all, right? They've got daily drafts, which is super fun, right? Because drafting is one of the most fun parts of playing fantasy. You only get to do it once a year. With Underdog, you get to do a draft for all the players that are playing just that night. Like, I don't know why more people haven't thought of this. It's like really fun to do. They also have these pick'ems, which are a blast, like just a whole bunch of prop bets, basically. You know, like, oh, Sidney Crosby, is he going to get a goal tonight or not? And then, like, you know, and then and the more you get right, the more you can win. It's a blast. It's really fun. Like I said, the team at Underdog is most of the same that built and sold draft.com, which we talked about on the show way back when. Brian, I've been playing Underdog. I've been having fun. I haven't been like the most successful so far. I think I'm more of like a long-term thinker, but it's still fun to just like watch as see how my players do throughout the night. I want you to tell our listeners how they can get this awesome game and awesome game. I don't know, what am I saying here? Awesome game and have fun just like I've been.
Yeah, for sure. All you need to do is look up Underdog Fantasy in your app store or go to underdogfantasy.com. And then after you make your first deposit, enter our code Karlsson, which will first off tell them we sent you and support the show that way. But second off, with our code, they'll honor this money back guarantee that they're making to our listeners, which is that they are so sure our listeners will love the Underdog app that during your first month, you better love it, or they'll well, that sounded threatening. Either you love it in your first month or Underdog is going to refund you all you've put into it up to $100. That's promo code Karlsson. Again, you can look up the app. That's promo code Karlsson. Again, look up Underdog Fantasy in your app store or go to underdogfantasy.com.
Okay, and along with Underdog, we may, or how do we always do it? It's so awkward.
Why don't you just like leave it blank and then just pick up?
Sure. Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Or maybe I'll say something that I might put in. I'll just say, all right, so we've got a lot of fantasy discussion. All right, so we still got lots of fantasy discussion to get to, and we'll talk to you about it in just a sec. Okay, let's go. So we've done like 1 or 2 of the teams of the like 18 to talk about on this episode. All right, and we're back. Again, we're in the outjuries section of the show. We've talked about a pretty high impact one in David Pastrnak, so we're going to go a few tiers down here, but still talk about some players that I think are interesting and also some other players on their team that have been piquing my interest lately. Let's go to New Jersey. Jesper Bratt has been back with the Devils for 3 games now, and he picked up his first point of the season today on Sunday, assisting on Andreas Janssen's first period goal in the game versus the Buffalo Sabres, which the Devils won. Obviously, Jesper Bratt sounds kind of boring, but I feel like he's definitely worth mentioning. He's been slotting in on the top line and the top power play with Jack Hughes, Hughes and Janssen at even strength. Bratt has shown glimpses of fantasy relevance over the last couple of years. And now with this deployment, I feel, and like today's assist and like 3 shots on goal today, I feel like he's someone that needs to be on our radar. Brian, is Jesper Bratt on your watch lists or even someone that you've considered adding to any of your teams?
Briefly, yeah. And he's been there for the last year or two. Also, I don't know if you remember, you probably do. He broke out onto the scene with a few goals in a few games, and we were watching to see how much exactly he could do in a top 6 role. And we saw at the end, we sort of settled that he seems to be more of a complementary player in the top 6 until further notice. You were talking about Jake DeBrusk. I'd have Bratt ahead of DeBrusk, but not by much, because he's had these opportunities and hasn't really been able to show himself to be a reliable producer. Also, I believe in Jack Hughes being great, so it's great that Jesper Bratt is playing with him. I should probably check. Did Jack Hughes get anything tonight?
One sec. I don't have that in front of me at the moment.
I'm on it. I'm grabbing it.
Their line
okay,
scored
nothing. Okay.
Okay.
Also, it's great that he plays with Jack Hughes. I believe in Jack Hughes being great. I am all aboard the Jack Hughes train, but Jack Hughes now has just 2 points in his last 6 games. So if you're going for the guy playing with Jack Hughes because he's playing with Hughes, then maybe you think twice about it. I don't think it's going to be this way all year for Hughes, but I could see him being streaky and harder still for him to really produce and that whole line to produce until Nico Hischier is back to ease some of the pressure off of that top line in New Jersey. So there are reasons to go after Jesper Bratt. None of them are terribly compelling to me or any more compelling than they have been over the last couple of seasons where I've generally left him alone.
Okay, so maybe you wait for a good schedule, but definitely have Brad on your watch list, and let's see if he can build on this 1 assist he got today. Brian, by the way, I definitely wasn't bringing up Jake DeBrusk. I'm over Jake DeBrusk. I brought up Nick Ritchie, who I feel like I would still take over Jesper Bratt at this point. But yeah, put DeBrusk at the bottom of the list.
You know who I would take above both those guys?
Who? David Krejci.
David Krejci.
Okay, so another guy, I was actually going to bring him up. Now I guess we have new news. I was going to bring up Kyle Palmieri, who's been kind of a snoozer. He's been not on this like top line. He's definitely like waiting for Nico Hischier to come back, right? Like that's where he's shown over the past few seasons. But he's been on a line with Nikita Gusev and Pavel Zacha, not having a great start to the year, only 3 assists in 8 games going into today, which he didn't play because now he is on the COVID protocol list, which is a very sad thing to hear this year. We've been hearing it for a lot of the players on our fantasy teams, making the season very, very tricky. So who even knows now when Kyle Palmieri will return? Like we don't know yet, like, if he's tested positive or not, or if he just was like in contact with someone. So we'll wait and see. But in the meantime, I was going to ask you if maybe people should consider dropping Kyle Palmieri. I guess now they don't need to. They should hopefully be able to just stash him in their IRs. But is this a situation where like when he comes back, I guess you don't have to dig too deep into him, but is he someone that like, you're worried about and maybe was close to being a drop before he went into the COVID protocol? Or were you like not worried because every year he's around a 55, 60 point guy, and why not just expect him to get back to that, at least at the worst case when Nico Hischier comes back?
Yeah, it's just a matter of when's that going to happen and what can Palmieri do in the meantime. I have Kyle Palmieri on my Cupful team and was looking at trade options with him a couple nights ago because of this crummy week I've had. Palmieri has been so disappointing this year as a guy who I drafted begrudgingly, kind of, because that high ceiling is not there. But I tried to take a different tack with some of my picks this year, and I valued Palmieri as a safe, boring, nice floor player who wouldn't knock my socks off, but who I wouldn't have to worry about. So much for that. But while researching trade options and thinking, okay, like, is it time to part with him and see what I can get back? I see that he's actually doing pretty well under the hood at 5-on-5. He's only been on the ice for 3 goals for, and he and his line mates are shooting 6.5%, which is low. And of course, Palmieri has not gotten in on any of those 3 goals at 5-on-5. Palmieri himself also has no goals on 14 5-on-5 shots, no goals on 21 total shots. Meanwhile, while nothing's working for him, he's not like Zibanejad and Kreider because he's putting up career high offensive rates across the board at 5-on-5. We're talking shot rates. We're talking expected goals rates, the whole kit and caboodle. So I still think Palmieri is going to be okay. And that makes him actually potentially a decent buy low target rather than a sell low target. That said, like you said, and I said already about Palmieri, he might need to wait for Hischier to return before he can actually break through. And we're really unclear about what Hischier's timeline to return is. We did get an update recently from Lindy Ruff that said, and I quote, his progress has been good and will get him back as soon as he feels well enough to play. This is Hischier, but he's had no setbacks and is progressing. And it's just like, okay, he's had no setbacks since this leg injury in December. But what would, like, no setbacks from what? What's the timeline here?
Yeah.
I have no idea how to take that.
So frustrating.
It's really frustrating. So we're looking at Palmieri, we're looking at Gusev, we're looking at Jesper Bratt, we're looking at Jack Hughes. All these guys, I think, are going to be positively impacted when Hischier is back and are going to struggle a bit for as long as he's out. So I just wish I knew a little bit more about his situation to know how long I'm going to have to bide my time with these Jersey guys.
Yeah, maybe in the meantime, maybe just cut bait, right? Because like if you're worried, then maybe other people in your league would be worried too and won't. You could just get the player back when Hischier comes back. Maybe if you're fastest on the trigger. One guy who's been really good is Ty Smith. I wasn't planning on bringing him up today, but another assist today for Ty Smith. What a great rookie season for this guy. I think he's leading all rookies in scoring at this point. I don't think anyone had that on their bingo card going into the year. Another quick thing about the Devils. Mackenzie Blackwood, we're still waiting for him to come back. He's been on the COVID list. It's nice though to see that Scott Wedgwood hasn't been as terrible as I expected. Eric Comrie played today against the Sabres and got the win. Also was fine, like 30 saves out of 33 shots against. So, and they have Aaron Dell coming up. So I remember we were worried about, like Brian, I remember when I was asking you about with Corey Crawford ending up not deciding to play the season and retiring, we were like, oh, maybe now we're worried about Mackenzie Blackwood because he's going to have to carry the load and he'll probably get tired out. Maybe they have some backup situation set up for him where he won't have to play like every single game. So that's kind of nice. I feel like this Devils team, if they could just get healthy, I've been saying it all year, right? I think they're looking good, but obviously like they're still able to somehow win games even with Hischier gone and Blackwood gone. So I'm curious to see what'll happen once everyone's healthy. I think this could be a surprising team. But let's go now to the Calgary Flames. You want to respond? Of course, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to point out like Wedgwood has been I don't know. You think he's been good? Like,
that's fine. He's been like, if this was the backup, that's fine. Like, they don't have to. It's not guaranteed. Like, I feel like all you want.
I don't think he's an NHL backup. Like, this is the reason the Devils went out and got Corey Crawford and have tried Keith Kincaid. Because Scott Wedgwood, aside from the first 3 games of his career when he was he stopped 91 of the first 93 shots he faced in the NHL. And I still remember talking about it on the podcast. It's all very exciting, but he's shown nothing since then to us or I think his organization. I think Eric Comrie could be the more legit backup option for the Devils. So if you do think that they're going to try and spell Blackwood a little more often, maybe Eric Comrie is where you look. I don't think this changes the equation a whole lot though, until we see that either of these guys is actually capable. And like I said, I don't have Scott Wedgwood, a whole lot of faith in Scott Wedgwood being the guy.
I guess it's just like not necessarily guaranteed lost night, but it's not great. And they have Aaron Dell also. So I feel like they could just like run all these 3 goalies through the taxi squad whenever they need to rest Blackwood and hopefully get someone who can put a decent game together. But okay. Oh, by the way, Miles Wood had a huge game today. So I don't know. We could keep mentioning Devils, but let's probably move on. But Wood is someone that I definitely have on my radar. I didn't have a question prepared for him, but like I have him in my dynasty league. He's been great. But I wanted to go now to Calgary, another out jury that sounds like a nobody, right? Dylan Dubé returned to the Flames on Saturday after missing 3 games, but he jumped right on a line with Matthew Tkachuk and Elias Lindholm, which is pretty sweet. No points, only 1 shot. So I guess, I don't even think it's worth like discussing him too much, but I'd probably just throw him in the pile of like watch list for deployment, but we probably need to see something first, along with like Jesper Bratt, right?
Yeah, and you're bearing the lead here, which means like with Dubé's deployment that you already mentioned, Andrew Mangiapane's on the top line with this happening.
Okay, yeah. So I guess some people might consider even the Tkachuk, Lindholm, Dubé line as the top line, but sure. Or you could also say Mangiapane, Tkachuk, and Monahan. Either way, not Tkachuk.
Gaudreau and you said
yeah,
Tkachuk and Monahan.
Mangiapane, Goudreau and Monahan. Either way, yeah, it's a good spot for Mangiapane. He hasn't done anything. So to me, he's like Dylan Dubé, right? Like, I'm interested. It seems like a good spot. They're not on the top power play, so I'm not going to expect a huge ceiling, but they're on a decent line. You'd think they could be a good spot starter. But are either of these guys people that you'd consider actually rostering more than just a spot start at this point? Like, Calgary plays Monday, Tuesday. So it seems like a good time to grab Dubé or Mangiapane and see what happens. But to be honest, I'm still not expecting much at this point. It's been a while since we've seen someone not named Tkachuk, Lindholm, Monahan, or Gaudreau do anything as a forward on the Calgary Flames. I guess maybe Backlund for a little bit, but that already feels like a long time ago.
It has been a while, and there hasn't been a whole lot of depth scoring in Calgary this year. Mangiapane, we sort of, or at least I did, I pumped him up before the start of the season, being like, he's had a lot of success with Tkachuk, especially towards the end of last season, and I was looking forward to him taking a step forward. This year, just 1 point in 7 games, taking a shot and a half a game, which is actually pretty normal for him, but it just means that he's giving you absolutely nothing with just 1 assist in 7 games. So I like the idea that maybe there's a chance he gets going on the top line. I think there's a good chance he gets going even if he lands back on the second line with Matthew Tkachuk. But in the meantime, he's not really rosterable. But I think for Monday, Tuesday schedule, Mangiapane and Dubé are like equally interesting as brief streamers.
I predict that in total, they'll have 1 point between the two of them in those 2 games.
So you're not streaming either of them?
I mean, I don't know. Like, if you could pick the right guy and you get a point, that's pretty good, I guess. Depends on what my other options are. Of course, bringing up Dubé, Brian, I wasn't going to like do an early, like we're still not even an hour into the show. Why am I bringing up a boring guy like Dylan Dubé? It was just a clever ruse to get you to talk about the real guy I'm interested in asking you about, which is 37-year-old Mark Giordano, who after going pointless for the last couple of games is down to only 3 points in 7 games on the season. We've long been discussing now that he's been bumped from the top power play by Rasmus Andersson all season long. I already talked about Rasmus Andersson a lot last week with Steve Laidlaw. By the way, Brian, Steve Laidlaw stepped in. You were on the DL or the IR for a short moment, and Laidlaw, wow, what a great show. So thanks again to Steve for coming on. And he and I talked about Rasmus Andersson. We already told you to add Rasmus Andersson, so we're not going to relitigate that unless you have a really hot take there. I'm more interested in getting your take on what to do with Giordano, because he's also seeing lower ice time than last year. Like, I'm seeing that he's averaging 21 minutes and 39 seconds a game versus almost 24 minutes last year, which has led to his block pace decreasing as well. Like, the one reason to hold on to someone like Giordano, even when he's not getting points, is he always was great for blocks. That doesn't seem to be the case as much this year. So Brian, like, going into the season, we talked about Giordano, and you had faith in him bouncing back from his big drop to a 42-point pace in 2019-20. I assume you don't feel that strongly about that anymore. And if anything, I'm curious to know, like, do you think he could at least match that 42-point pace that he had last year? Because currently he's pacing for even less.
Yeah, it's been a really ugly season for Mark Giordano so far, and not only because he's not on the top power play. That was half expected. We knew there was a lot of challengers, and we didn't know if he'd be on it the first game and then off shortly after or off entirely. It seems like it's been the latter, which is a real bummer. But the even bigger bummer is that Giordano is also seeing fewer minutes total, and in those minutes, his block rates have dropped. Like, he's not only blocking less because he's playing less, he's blocking less in the time that he is afforded. So that he is afforded, which we did kind of anticipate before the season, or at least thought aloud about, because Giordano's 37 years old and maybe that has an impact on the physical pieces of his game. But I feel like what we've seen from him so far this season is a pretty fair representation of what to expect going forward. You know, I'd have had him around 55 points, upside from more with that top power play deployment. But with that gone, I'll take 40 points from Giordano and hope for good peripherals, kind of like a power play to McAvoy type of player. I'm just hoping he can actually come through with it, though, because what I thought, like Palmieri, and again, you've heard me talk about my garbage Cupful team all week. I might have the lowest score in the entire Cupful this week. I had a lot of guys not show up, and a lot of guys like Palmieri and like Giordano who seem to have these safe floors and are falling through them. So I am officially worried about Giordano. And if he doesn't step it up and start blocking more shots and maybe throwing another hit or two here and there, he is dangerously on the fringe of not being rosterable.
Yeah, so you've heard it here first. It sounds like Brian saying maybe give him another week or two, hope for something to change, but maybe don't expect much. It doesn't seem like too much is going to change, especially if his ice time stays the same. So kind of a bummer for anyone who took Giordano somewhat high in their drafts. One good player you're happy about is obviously Jacob Markstrom. 37 save shutout versus the Habs yesterday. Holy cow. I saw some stats. Like, apparently the Habs like totally dominated this game, but because of Jacob Markstrom, the Flames got the 2-0 win. He's up to a 929 save percentage in 6 games now. And this is in the dreaded Canadian division that everyone was like afraid of having goalies in. And yet Markstrom has been like phenomenal. Gotta imagine he's an early Vezina candidate at this point. So just like, again, I don't really have a question here, but wow, Bonanza, Markstrom, what way to go. I don't know, I was a little, not like concerned, but I was a little bit like, oh, maybe he's a little overrated going into the season. But like right now, you can't say that. He seems like one of the best goalies in the league.
Yeah, Jacob Markstrom sure it continues to look like the real deal because he already looked that way last year and for parts of his career before that. I definitely imagine there are some Canadian division counterparts like Vancouver and Edmonton who I think had a shot at landing Jacob Markstrom and might rue the day that they did not make a bigger run at getting him on their teams now that it's really being rubbed in their faces that they have to play Calgary and Markstrom over and over and over again with their own goaltending troubles to still try and remedy.
Yeah, so good for anyone who drafted Markstrom, including me in the couple. But I'm still going to lose this week probably, so I'm not going to get too excited. But okay, so let's go to now injuries. Strap in, everyone. We've got a ton of them. A lot of them just from like Saturday's games. Like I was already kind of preparing the show that it was just like injury after injury. We got to start in Carolina. Petr Mrazek suffered what looked like a broken or at least like a dislocated thumb early in the game versus Dallas on Saturday. James Reimer stepped in, stopped 10 of 11 shots for the easy 4-1 win. And when you hear like he stepped in and stopped 10 of 11 shots, you might be thinking like, oh, he must have come mid-game. Like, no, that was like every shot of the game, which is kind of crazy that Dallas only took 11 shots in that game. But anyways, Reimer stopped 10 of them. Had a good game. Then he got the game today in a rematch versus Dallas, and the Stars took a few more shots. They actually took 29 shots, and Reimer stopped 26 of them. But Carolina still got the win, 4-3. So that's 2 wins in a row now for James Reimer. And like the news has been that like Mrazek, like it's not as bad as it could have been. So maybe it's like closer to this being like dislocated versus broken. Still got to imagine that he's going to miss a week or 2 or 3. I don't know. As long as he's out, James Reimer is probably your volume goalie on a good team in this Carolina Hurricanes team. So you've got to add him in pretty much any format, right? Like I can't think of a reason why not. Like, yeah, Reimer's not like the best goalie in the world, but he's also shown that he's pretty solid and good. And if he's going to be a volume starter on this like really strong team, then why not go and grab him?
For sure. I just want to clarify one piece. When you say volume starter, keep in mind that that doesn't mean the same thing necessarily in Carolina as it does in other NHL cities. And that's because they are one of the best shot suppressing teams in the league. Right now, only Boston allows fewer shot attempts per 60 minutes against. And they're both, Carolina and Boston, in kind of a league of their own. Like it's a pretty big jump to the next team. It's not a huge jump, but anyway, then Vegas, Dallas, Colorado, Pittsburgh are the next best teams at shot suppression. So the downside of that is when Reimer gives up 2 goals in a night, he's down to like a 900 save percentage. Like it's really easy for him to win games and still be like an 885 goalie. So that's one thing to look out for. We should mention though, Petr Mrazek was doing amazing this season. He leads the league early on in Delta Fenwick save percentage. He's having a really good season. Elon, if I had to just ask you to guess what Mrazek's save percentage was over 4 games so far this season, what would you say?
Maybe like 955 around there.
Oh, you're such a butt. Yeah, it's 955. So Mrazek's been doing really well, facing few shots. I think Reimer can probably do the same. Alex Nedeljkovic is going to be the backup. I could see Carolina still maybe trying to keep Reimer's workload light and seeing what Nedeljkovic can handle. But of course, Reimer is a number 1 or at worst a 1A right now on a good team who's going to put up who's going to be able to grab wins more often than not when he plays and can put up decent numbers the rest of the time.
Yeah, like maybe Djokovic gets a game or 2, but I don't think they're in a situation like this is a team that's trying to win the cup this year, right? So they're going to try to give themselves the best chance to win game in, game out, I would think. So then moving beyond the goalie to the forwards, to the forwards. What was a stupid thing? I'll just say that whole thing over again. All right, so that's the goalie in Carolina. Let's go look at some forwards now. So Teuvo Teravainen has still been on the COVID list the whole time. And of course, Andrei Svechnikov and Sebastian Aho are the top Canes forwards with Teravainen out of the picture. They have 6 and 5 points apiece in the 5 games going into today. I guess I could actually give you guys an update on let's assume Carolina scored 4 times. I'm going to assume Aho Okay, Aho and assist. Oh, nothing for Svechnikov. Okay, I'm surprised. Anyways, they're great. I remember we did a show with Fantasy Hockey Podcast going into the season, and they were really worried about Svechnikov not being worth his ADP. At this point, he's like a point per game. So we'll see if he can keep it up. I remember like we were discussing, yeah, maybe he could be a point per game, but does he have upside for more? Obviously, too early to tell. Carolina hasn't played many games because of all those postponements. So it's obviously worth mentioning with Teravainen out, like Brock McGinn has been on that top line with the two studs, Aho and Svechnikov, for the last couple of games. He's done nothing, and doesn't really matter because apparently, according to Roto-World, Teravainen may be back as soon as Tuesday. So we might just get back to Teravainen, Svechnikov, Aho as things should be. So there you go. So forget about Brock McGinn. The guy I really want to ask you about is Vincent Trocheck, who's been centering the second line with Nichas and Nino Niederreiter. He's been playing with the big guns on the top power play, and he's doing so good. Like on Saturday, he had 2 goals, including a power play goal and a power play assist versus Dallas. Like, what did he do today? I guess I could bring this up. Okay, so no points today, but still, like, he's putting up points. It's kind of reminding me, like, okay, I'm thinking, like, okay, Vincent Trocheck, second line center, top power play with a bunch of studs. That kind of sounds like what was going on back in 2017-18 when he put up 31 goals and 75 points. Brian, is that Trocheck potentially back? Like, is this a situation where we're he just wasn't getting the opportunity? We were always saying, remember when he was struggling on Florida those last couple of years? We're like, well, yeah, he's been bumped from the top power play. That's where he got a huge source of his points. He's back there now. It's going well. Do you think this is sustainable? Or is this like the perfect moment to be reaching out to the Zibanejad owner and trying to pull a fast one and pull in Mika for Vincent Trocheck, who is for sure going to not be able to keep up this production?
Good luck doing that. If you can pull it off, by all means, go for it. Like, that's not to say that what Trocheck's doing is not completely sustainable. Like, I'm not going to say you're wrong about all you've said. I will say a few things are true. First is that, yes, he's on the second line. Yes, Trocheck's on the top power play. Trocheck is also seeing more ice than last year. Trocheck is putting up some outstanding rate stats under the hood. All of this is true while Trocheck is putting up some unsustainably high point participation, which is a new way that I'm going to frame IPP, which just says how many, which refers to, of all the goals scored on the ice, how many that Trocheck gets a point on. And I have to credit John Newhold, who co-hosted the auction episode, with sharing that frame with me. So yeah, unsustainably high point participation for Trocheck and a shooting percentage that's 2 or 3 times what he's had in previous season. Where this all balances out to, I don't know exactly, but it definitely looks like Trocheck is going to have better season than he had last year. He's not going to continue on exactly this torrid pace and has some room to regress. But at the same time, we are seeing a Vincent Trocheck that we really haven't seen, and we've been watching for him, right? Even before his big breakout season, it was like, oh yeah, this is a guy who can do stuff between 55 and 60 points, seems to be in a good spot. And then he was hit really hard by some low shooting percentage and like loss of role and deployment over the last couple seasons. Even when he got to Carolina in the trade for Eric Halla, it was kind of disappointing to see what he had to offer. So I'm glad that he seems to have found some of his mojo and is showing it off. And I think his value this year is probably going to be the second highest it's ever been.
Yeah, and obviously with Teravainen back, there's always the possibility that these lines will change. Who knows? Maybe Trocheck gets Svechnikov as a winger and Aho Teravainen. So I don't know. I don't want to speculate. We'll find out on Tuesday. So definitely check the lines. I'm sure the short shifts guys will bring it up if something really interesting is happening with the deployment in Carolina. Another guy who you might consider trying to trade Trocheck for, if you want to try to buy low on someone, we got to talk about Evgeny Malkin. But actually, we're in injuries. So I forgot. This is my ruse again. We're going to start with the injury, then get to Malkin because his teammate, who's very injury prone, just like Evgeny Malkin. Actually, Chris Letang, he hobbled off to the locker room after a corner battle with Adam Fox halfway through the first period on Saturday versus the Rangers, and he did not return. This is not a recap, this is not a rerun episode of Keeping Karlsson. You are listening to the January 31st, 2021. It's just yet another Chris Letang injury. Actually, last year he was pretty healthy, I think, for the most part. But yeah, he's off. Who knows how long he'll be out? I don't have an update that I've seen at this point on Sunday night. Looks like both John Marino and a rookie named Pierre-Olivier Joseph, they saw equal time on the power play in this game versus the Rangers, just over a couple of minutes each. Both also saw an uptake in ice time, and they produced. Like Marino finally got his first point of the season. He assisted on a Jake Gensel third period tying goal. And Pierre-Olivier Joseph played 25 minutes and 58 seconds and picked up 3 assists, including on Crosby's overtime winner. So none of these points were on the power play. So Brian, what's our advice right now? Like, I'd imagine generally when Letang gets injured, we're telling people to rush to grab the Pittsburgh defenseman, generally like Justin Schultz, right? But he's not around anymore. Is there like Marino or Joseph? We don't even know who's going to be on the top power play. So yeah, do you like one of these guys more than the other? Do you think they're both like a 50-50 shot? Also, who is Pierre-Olivier Joseph? I hadn't even heard of this guy before yesterday.
I'm going to answer all those questions, but I don't want to just gloss over Chris Letang for any of his suffering managers who have watched him just have this before this injury, even healthy. I actually think this injury is good news for a Letang owner because you don't have to decide what to do with him. Just pop him in IR because of the just brutal year he's having. 3 points in 9 games, only 1 point with the man advantage, and his shot rates have dropped on top of that. The eye test has also looked really bad from what I've seen. He and Malkin, neither one of them looks like themselves, and that's why they're being outscored by like Jared McCann and Teddy Bluger. So it's probably a nice respite for anyone managing him who's got nothing from Letang early on. And I guess the other side is that, oh, good. And now he just got injured, which is classic Letang, but maybe it'll give him some time to heal and get better and come back a different player than he's been for the first 9 games of the season. That said, now we need to look to these replacements you've mentioned, like Pierre-Olivier Joseph and John Marino. First, I'll share what Josh Yohe said in The Athletic. He's the Pittsburgh beat writer there. He said that Joseph looks like Marino did at this time last season, in that he's confidently emerging as this legit NHL option who can take on roles in minutes. And for anyone wondering, who is Pierre-Olivier Joseph? He is a first-round pick of the Arizona Coyotes back in 2017. They grabbed him 23rd overall, started his career with 17 points in 52 games in his first pro season with Wilkes-Barre Scranton of the AHL. He got to Pittsburgh from Arizona in, you might know, the Phil Kessel trade. Wow, look at that. Suddenly we're seeing some of the results from the deal. Elon, can you name one other piece from that trade?
Oh man, I thought the big piece was just unloading Kessel's contract. They also got this like big minute defenseman. I don't know. I don't remember who else came.
I know. It was Alex Galchenyuk. Was also involved, and a guy named Dane Burks and a 2021 fourth round pick. But I guess Pierre-Olivier Joseph might have been the centerpiece of the deal coming from Arizona, and now we're seeing why. He's never seemed, like looking at his junior numbers, he's never seemed to be like a huge scorer, but I'm open to him being a top power play quarterback for sure. So I would take a shot on Pierre-Olivier Joseph. Meanwhile, John Marino, we sort of assumed that this would be a great chance for him to make his case to step into Letang's skates, because of all the rumors that Pittsburgh would like to move on from Chris Letang. And even with Jim Rutherford leaving, apparently, like he left suddenly earlier this week, and I saw one rumor, unsubstantiated, that it had to do with his desire to move Letang, and which would have opened the spot anyway. And we thought that would mean good things for John Marino, but John Marino has not looked like Pierre-Olivier Joseph this year or John Marino last year. He seems to be struggling a little more when he's on the ice and not looking as solid all around. So if I had to pick one guy to take a chance on, I'll take the guy who already put up points last night in Pierre-Olivier Joseph and see if that can continue.
Yeah, I think I'll respectfully disagree. If I had to pick someone right now, I take Marino. But obviously, once you see some line combinations, that will illuminate things. Like I'm gonna feast on the bigger sample size from last year of Marino rather than the start of this year. But yeah, I mean it's a brand new situation now, so it'll be really interesting to see. And like, yeah, Pittsburgh maybe should have listened to Rutherford, trade Letang before he got injured. Now they'd have no Letang and the return in that trade instead of now having nothing. But anyways, Letang might be fine. We haven't even heard prognosis yet. He might be back next week for all we know. But okay, like I teased, I want to ask you about Evgeny Malkin, another guy like Zibanejad who's been pretty un-Malkin-y so far this season, like better than Zibanejad, right? He has some points. He has a goal and 3 assists in 9 games so far. To be fair, he was pointless in his first 3. So it's 4 points in 6 games since then. Not terrible, but not like Evgeny Malkin, like you expect him to be like amazing. He's also shooting less than usual. Brian, like, are you seeing any red flags under the hood for Malkin, or is this like just an obvious, like, hold steady, he's fine, bad luck, whatever?
No, there's red flags everywhere. Malkin has looked bad to the eye and on the score sheet. Jesse Marshoff, actually, from your excellent 31 Beat series over this past summer, he shared this article on The Athletic where he gave specific video examples of how Malkin has looked disengaged and like he's just trying to like fly away on offense the second the Penguins get the puck because he's trying to get off the schneid, but it's just making things worse. And yeah, that's been the season for Evgeny Malkin so far. The thing is that I don't know what could be the cause behind this. Like I said, the eye test, he fails. He fails in his numbers too, the ones I normally look at. He's seeing drops like Zibanejad. And I just haven't seen any great theories to explain what's going on. It seems like there's something more than just a cold snap happening. What would that even mean? I don't know. But it seems like one of those things that's maybe a human thing. You don't just suddenly start being awful at your job that you're normally elite at for no reason. There is some daylight that we've seen recently, though. In Josh Yohe's last article at The Athletic, he said that he saw a couple bursts from Malkin that he hadn't seen all season long and that you'd normally expect from him. So maybe, just maybe, there's reason to be excited. But I still just don't feel like I have the full story on what exactly is going wrong with Malkin's season so far. So I can't give any special advice other than to, well, hold. Or if you're feeling antsy, maybe you look at your draft and see, okay, who went 1, 2, 3 rounds later, and see if there's a deal there that you want to make just to get out from under the risk of holding on to him and him not panning out. But right now, I, as somebody who rosters Malkin, I'm not about to do that. I'm going to hold on to him. I'm going to give him another week and see what happens. After that, I'll probably give him another week. In the cupful, actually, he was just traded in one of our divisions for Oliver Bjorkstrand, which at first I was just like, oh my God, like why? But then I took a moment to think, would I offer that deal? I don't think it's that awful or unjustifiable at this point.
Yeah, maybe like you should throw some fab dollars, like a sweetener in there to make it worth it. But yeah, like Bjorkstrand's producing and Malkin isn't producing as much. But I'd obviously still take Malkin. Like, don't get me wrong. I'd be interested though, Brian. Like, let's say if you got a trade offer, like you said, like maybe like a, I don't know, Kopitar, who's having a really awesome year, or Pacioretty, who's like, just a really solid producer, especially with his shots on goal and everything. I don't know. I hope it'll happen. Someone in tier 2 San Jose, send Brian a reasonable trade offer for Malkin just so I could see him sweat it out and decide if he should take it or not. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
I will sweat over it. I looked at the guys who were taken right after I took Malkin. So you've got Taylor Hall, Kyle Connor, JT Miller, Huberto Tavares, Scheifele, Wheeler. And as of this point, I would rather any of those guys for the first 2 weeks of the season. I'm still not like giving up and thinking I would prefer them over Malkin over the next 9 weeks. But yeah, I'm open. Send me an offer.
Joey in the chat is saying the commentators in the Pens game last night said something about Malkin not getting sufficient gym time because of COVID gym closures. Yeah. I mean, who knows how much validity there is to that playing a factor, but it is a weird season, right? So there might be some players who just have a down year for reasons like that are like this, like they can't hit their normal gym routine, and that could maybe make a difference. Like, this is a game, it's like a fast game, like one small little decrease changes you maybe from a 90-point player to a 70-point player. So yeah, a very interesting point. And also that'll be really fun for over the summer, right? Hopefully the following season we'll go back to, I don't even want to project because who knows? I don't want to jinx it. And I was about to say like next season when it's back to normal, maybe we'll expect these players to bounce back, but who even knows if that's going to be the case. So, okay, that's the, no, what am I talking about? That's not even done with injuries. We're not even close to being done injuries, unfortunately. The next thing I want to talk about is Matt Dumba, who took a really ugly looking fall after getting tangled with Jordan Greenway in the third period on Saturday for the Wild. It looked scary. I don't know. It looked like his leg turned the wrong way. Didn't really enjoy watching that clip, to be honest. So Dumba had cooled down. Like, he had a hot start to the year. He had like a couple good games to start. And we were like, ooh, is it Dumba time this year? Is he going to get back to what we were expecting? But he was actually pointless in 6 games before scoring a goal and taking 5 shots versus Colorado before getting hurt. That's like the worst, right? Like, you finally break out of your slump. You're having a good game. Then you get hurt, and who knows how long he'll be out. Again, we don't know. He's on the IR right now. I'm expecting it's going to be quite a bit of time. So I guess this means we're going to be seeing a lot of Ryan Suter and Jared Spurgeon on the top power play. I don't know how exciting that is for you. Like, regardless, they were already there anyway, so I guess less chance of Dumba bumping them. Suter's pointless in 3 games. Spurgeon only has an assist all season. I don't know. Is there any impact here, fantasy-wise, aside from just like Dumba, maybe like a Letang, someone that maybe you were thinking of dropping anyways, and now you could just stash him in IR and not have to worry about it?
Yeah, I think that might be it, because Spurgeon and Suter are probably already owned, although there's been reason for their managers to also be impatient with them. This show sucks, Elon. I am talking about I have Spurgeon. He's on my roster. I have to talk about all these guys who are just being, but I did go back and look to mid-December of 2018, which is when Matt Dumba was injured and out for the season. And we saw what happened in the months that followed in the remaining part of the 18-19 season. Jared Spurgeon had 24 points in 50 games. Ryan Suter had 21 points in 50 games. So neither of them setting the world on fire at all with those paces, but decent. But at the same time, their value didn't skyrocket or anything with Dumba out of the lineup. Of course, they'll probably see bigger roles as long as Dumba is out, but I don't know that it's anything game-changing. Also, apropos of nothing, I guess, although we are talking about Minnesota defensemen, Minnesota actually had 3 defensemen out briefly on their power play the other night. We talked about the 5 forwards in Boston. Minnesota's going the other way. They're working their way towards 5 defensemen.
Oh my
Brad
God.
Hunt was the 3rd defenseman on there, I guess, like probably playing some kind of forward role, but 3 defensemen and probably still no centerman on the ice for that power play in Minnesota. Also, can I also just mention one Minnesota player who's doing really well, since we've mentioned a few that aren't?
Sure. I was going to bring up some people also, but yeah, throw it out.
Okay, Jordan Greenway. Is he on your list?
No?
8 points in 10 games so far this season, and nothing. Well, okay, there's a little unsustainability under those numbers. His line is probably overperforming. He's actually been in on a lot of the Joel Eriksson-Ek business, but he's now not on that line, and I think still doing half decent. But he also does nothing except for pick up assists. 1 goal, 7 assists, and only 11 shots over 10 games. So if you do add him to your roster, you are basically saying, look, I'm taking this guy who really passes first, second, and third and doesn't play on the top power play, but is putting up points in a pretty nice way. So if you want a guy who's off to a nice little run and not getting any hype or press or buzz about it, take a look at Jordan Greenway.
Okay, sure. Yeah, he's actually. I'm looking at the lines for today, like the real-time lines over on Frozen Tools, and Greenway's playing on a line with Eriksson-Ek and Ryan Hartman for today's game versus Colorado. Then we've got Parisi with Bjugstad and Luke Johnson, and then Kaprizov with Nico Sturm and Victor Rask. So yeah,
I guess when you have only 3 good offensive players, you make sure they all play separately.
Jeez, man. Like, well, they have another one named Kevin Fiala, who's suspended for 3 games. This is crushing me in my couple matchup. Why doesn't Yahoo? Can I have rant for that? Like, why doesn't Yahoo let us stash these suspended players anywhere? We have IR. I thought the whole point of IR Plus is like for these people missing games but not on the IR. That's why we have this thing we've invented called IR Plus. Like, no, don't put suspended players there. Okay, well, what about these NA spots? Isn't NA supposed to represent players who like aren't in the league or something? They've been putting some like COVID players there, but like suspended, no, like just suffer. Like, I didn't push Matt Roy into the boards. Kevin Fiala did. So why am I getting punished?
Yeah, but you have Kevin Fiala, so you're responsible for his actions.
Like, the Minnesota Wild get to put an extra player onto their roster to replace Kevin Fiala.
That's a good argument.
Why can't I? Anyway, Minnesota was having a decent start to the season before the. Also, like Marcus Johansson is injured, so this team is starting to really fall apart. But they were 5-3 before the Fiala suspension. Now they're 5-4 going into today. They're playing Colorado. It's 1-1 after a period.
Oh, and you know who has that goal?
Jordan Greenway.
Yeah, you got it. Jordan Greenway with his second of the night. And thanks, Adam, in the chat for sharing that live update with us.
So they still have, after today, 2 more games versus Colorado coming up. So I think they're going to be under 500 by the time this stretch is over. And then Fiala will be back. I don't know. Hopefully things will turn around. By the way, one good news, they have Cam Talbot back, right? So anyone who grabbed Kaapo Kakkonen and enjoyed a little run, which ended terribly yesterday with 5 goals against Colorado. But anyways, I think now you drop Kaapo Kakkonen. I'm assuming that they're going to go back to giving Talbot the majority of the starts.
Yeah, I think so too. Kaapo Kakkonen, though, did really well in his introduction to being a pro in the NHL. Kakkonen was actually a .917 goalie going into that Colorado game with a 3-2 record, only 11 goals against in 5 games. But that one night against Colorado brought him down to a .903 on the season. It's too early to say anything for sure about Kakkonen, but some really good early returns there. And I wonder, like we figured Cam Talbot was really going to have to be a workhorse this season. I wonder if Kakkonen's performance lets Minnesota rest Talbot a little more than planned, sort of what you were talking about in New Jersey, but with, I think, a little more daylight for that possibility.
Yeah, honestly, like, I'm not sure why you say that we figured Talbot would have to be a workhorse. Like, I think we knew that Kakkonen was going to come in and be decent. But anyways, yeah, I think he's a solid backup, but Talbot's a starter. So no reason to hold Kakkonen, especially for next week. Like, what, he'll get one of those games against Colorado. Wow, well, you definitely want to have him for that. Okay, so another defenseman injury to talk about, a bad break for Justin Schultz. Kind of like Dumba. Like, he's finally doing good. and now he got hurt. He got struck in the face by a puck on Thursday, missed Saturday's 4-3 win over the Caps, or for the Caps over the Boston Bruins. Ever since Ovi, Orlov, Kuznetsov, and Samsonov went on that COVID protocol, Schultz has gotten on the top power play, and he's been on fire. He had 3 straight 2-point games. 3 power play assists in that span, but also 2 goals and 1 assist at even strength. So he was also producing not with that extra power play role, I guess just some extra ice time with Orlov out. Brian, do you think that Justin Schultz can remain fantasy relevant whenever he's back from his injury? Like, assuming the Caps at this point are like back at full strength, Schultz is back at the second power play. Still, he's like coming off this great run. Do you think he could continue to at least produce somewhat, like be like a 35, 40 point defenseman, which is worthwhile in fantasy? Or is he going to go back to the 0 points in first 5 games, Justin Schultz, that we saw to start the year?
I mean, 35 points is a pretty low bar to set for fantasy
Fair.
relevance. So I think Justin Schultz can probably hit that. But no, I don't think he's going to be any more valuable than he ever has been. Although, if you're desperate to believe that he will be, Justin Schultz had games with 4 and 5 shots on goal in that little run he had, which is a very fun change from someone who often takes a single shot most nights that he plays. But yeah, 3 of those 6 points he got on this run came on the power play. He'll be off the top power play. And then he's never been known to be able to do a whole lot at 5-on-5. In fact, he's a defensive liability, so he often doesn't even get to play a whole lot at 5-on-5. So yeah, I feel like you've asked me this question probably, I don't know, upwards of 30 or 40 times over the lifetime of keeping Karlsson. Is Justin Schultz gonna be fantasy relevant? And like twice I've said, maybe this is not going to be the 3rd time.
Yeah, like I'm obviously people are into him because he's coming off this great stretch. But I think, yeah, once he's back to being the 3rd like most used defenseman on the team, that's a very big difference than being the 2nd most used defenseman on the team. Like maybe he's more talented than Orlov, like when he gets Orlov's spot for offense. I mean, not for defense, but yeah, like now once Orlov is back, I agree with you that I think he goes back to not being worth rostering if he wasn't before. Okay, so another goalie that's doing well, like just like Kapokakinen on Minnesota, Vitek Vanacek has really been taking advantage of his opportunity on the Caps with Samsonov out of the picture. In fact, the Caps have gotten 9 out of 10 possible standings points in these last 5 games where they've been shorthanded. Yeah, Ovi and Orlov were back for the game on Saturday, but like, wow, like I don't think anyone expected this. Like Vanacek's now sitting at 5 wins in 7 games and 918 save percentage. So now I'm really curious to see what happens when Samsonov comes back. Like everyone was assuming that Samsonov was going to be a big volume starter this year when Henrik Lundqvist announced he wouldn't be able to play the year. Now it's kind of looking like maybe this will be a Rangers situation, right? Like I think Vanacek has at least earned himself a decent number of starts. Like Samsonov, he only played like a couple games, but he didn't look amazing. So I think at this point, I don't know. I'm nervous as a Samsonov owner. I think I almost like maybe keep him in IR for a bit and see how things play out before dropping someone for him. Because if you're in a league like the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, where a tandem goalie isn't really worth holding, I think Samsonov with Vanacek's play, like I think Vanacek and Samsonov will now maybe not be worth rostering all season because it could turn into a tandem.
If only there were a place where I could get some sense of how many leagues in the cupful guys like Samsonov and Vanacek are rostered, and using that information, I could decide whether or not, they're still worth rostering or if I can safely drop them to free agency. Anyway, maybe we'll talk more about that later. In the meantime, the door is open for Vanacek to take some starts away from Samsonov, who, like you said, we thought was going to have to be a workhorse. Came in, got off to a rocky start, 846 and 889 save percentages, and Vanacek has come in and has earned a point in all 7 games he's played. It all comes out to a 917 save percentage. That's a result of very high highs and very low lows. Do you know what his closest save percentages to 917 have been this year? They've been a 900 game and a 930 game. And that's the story of the Vanacek roller coaster that he's been taking his managers on. But at this point, the net aggregate result of all the play he's had is probably that he could have worked himself into a timeshare by the time Samsonov gets back. So anybody who did draft Samsonov being like, oh yeah, there's no competition in Washington, this guy's going to start all the games, you might have to rethink your goaltending strategy.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And yeah, Brian, you're right. We may have a tool to help with that. I can't tell you that I have this information, and maybe others will be able to have this information since we have 23 cupful divisions throughout from tiers 1 through 6, and Vanacek is rostered in all of them but 1, which makes sense, right? Like actually this question isn't that interesting, right? Like Vanacek is obviously rostered in almost all leagues right now because Samsonov's injured, and Samsonov's probably rostered in all leagues because he's just in the IR. No one had to drop him. The real interesting question will be what happens once Samsonov is healthy, and then we can see how teams adjust And we may be able to do so. So, okay, another injury, last one of this show. Okay, then we'll end with some good and bad news in terms of hot streaks and cold streaks. So Tyler Bertuzzi suffered an upper body injury on Saturday for the Red Wings in the OT loss to Florida. And Detroit played today. I'm pretty sure this is the issue when you prep a show and then after that you record the show in between. The game happens, but okay, I'm looking live, and yeah, Bertuzzi didn't play. So I don't know, Brian, if you've seen an update. He might be out. Like in the meantime, this Red Wings team is definitely not very deep. Like they were already not very deep. And now they lose a big name in Tyler Bertuzzi. I guess on the plus side, Anthony Mantha seems to be waking up a little bit. He had points in his last couple games going into today. There was a stretch where he was like off the top power play, and so was Larkin. It was like very weird. I guess Blashill was trying something, but apparently today was back to kind of normal, like Mantha on the top power play, but still not on a line with Larkin. I don't know. A lot of people have been asking about dropping Mantha on our Discord and Twitter lately, and for good reason, right? He's not having a great year so far, and like his like at least if he was holding good deployment, then he'd be like, he'll be fine. Like whatever. Detroit's kind of a messy team, and sometimes they're going to go through cold stretches. But if Mantha's like cold himself and not getting the primo deploymento, is he someone that you're considering dropping or would be considering dropping, even though you probably had to spend like a high draft pick to get him?
Yeah, he's someone I had my eye on in a lot of drafts, and I'm glad he didn't fall to me in as many as I hoped, because it has been a really rough ride for Anthony Mantha. First, your Bertuzzi question, just day to day, is the latest.
Okay. And actually, I'll give you another update. So Mantha scored today. I don't know if you have that in your notes against Florida. So it was a 3-2 loss. Mantha, a goal and 5 shots. So actually, look, today's looking good. If he could keep this up, then that answers the question.
Sorry, just a sec. I will follow up right on that. Oh, that's great news. And he had a goal on 4 shots the game before. So that's very promising. Actually, this game against Florida, it looks like, I'm looking live on Frozen Tools, he's played 23 and a half minutes, which is his season high by like 4 minutes. That's crazy. So I guess he's getting some extra play and is having a good game, which is very encouraging news for any Anthony Mantha, which is very encouraging news for anybody who rosters Mantha. There's also this quote that came out last night. It was shared by Prashant Iyer, another beat writer featured on 31 Beats, that Jeff Blashill was just like, the power play is just about players executing. And because he had swapped out like Mantha and Larkin briefly from the top unit and being like, it's just about executing. It's not about schematics. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, you're the coach. Fix the power play. Don't just put worse players on the power play and think that's going to solve the problem. The power play in Detroit has been woeful, and that's been a big reason for Mantha and a lot of Red Wings struggles so far this season. Mantha, of course, just has 1 power play point heading into today's game. Detroit was 4 for 31 on the power play, and Mantha wasn't even seeing a ton of deployment on it, only 50% share of his team's power play. But at 5-on-5, he'd been okay. So what I'd like Blashill to do was, instead of saying, we're going to change the players, how about you change the power play? Figure out what's wrong. I mean, you're the freaking coach. Do your job and help Anthony Mantha get production for anybody who has him on their roster, because I think he's still as capable as he ever has been. Detroit's just been a mess in the way that they've been deploying their players in very curious ways, splitting Mantha and Larkin, keeping them off the top power play. That's my biggest concern here. It's not Anthony Mantha himself. It's the guy making the decisions behind the bench.
I mean, I feel like you also probably should put some blame on Steve Yzerman not giving Mantha and Larkin many people to play with, like with Zadina on the COVID list and now Bertuzzi injured. This team looks rough.
Yeah, it's very rough in Detroit. You wouldn't think there are places for Mantha and Larkin to land that wouldn't be good for them. You'd think they'd at least be playing together. Of course, that's not the case. And if they're not playing together, it's really bad news for both of them, because the replacement options are not awesome.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I just realized there actually is another injury on Detroit in Jonathan Bernier, which normally you would say, okay, that means Greiss is going to play a lot. I didn't even think to bring that up on the show because, like, who cares? No one wants Greiss, even though he's going to play more games, unless I guess you need saves. Okay, so let's now go to some hot streaks. Okay, Brian, I'm thinking let's play a game of sustainable or fleeting, a Keeping Karlsson classic. I'm going to tell you some players. who have been doing really well. And you're going to answer the question: is the production that you're seeing sustainable? Is it something that you think they can keep up to some extent? Like a lot of these guys, like over a point per game, and like obviously I don't mean literally sustainable. Like, is Joe Pavelski going to end the season with like 150 points? But you know what I mean? Like, is he going to stay awesome, or is his production fleeting? You think it's going to go back to what they were like last year? So let's start with these Dallas Stars. So many dimension, right? Pavelski, Klingberg, Gurionov, Radulov. 10, 8, 7, and 5 points in 5 games, respectively, going into today. I know Radulov got another point today. Rupe Hintz, 5 points in only 3 games going into today. So make that 5 points in 4 games. So all summer, we talked about how it's hard to bank on Dallas guys because this team doesn't score much. But here we are. The team has scored a lot of goals this season. Another 3 goals today, though. They did have that weird 11-shot game versus the Canes on Saturday, and not too many shots more today. So I'm still trying to even figure out, like, is this an offensive team? Like, did Rick Bowness change something? Are all these guys? Oh, like Jamie Benn, by the way, came back today and had a huge game. So you could add him to the list. Like, just in general, are we back on, like, Dallas players can be worth rostering and could be like 70+ point players? Or are you still thinking that this production will be fleeting, and your prediction that no one on Dallas can be especially offensive, like, is that still the case?
That is still the case. And I'm going to tell you why. I know it might be hard to believe, especially because we saw Dallas score goals in the playoffs, right? They could play that high event, high scoring hockey, and that's what helped them get all the way to the Stanley Cup finals before losing, which is, sorry, that sounded like shade against Dallas. I didn't mean for it to be. But yeah, I'm not bought in that Dallas has changed enough fundamentally to suddenly be this high scoring team. And one number I'll share to illustrate that picture is 18%. And that is Dallas's team shooting percentage at all strengths. 18%. That leads the league and is entirely insane. The highest shooting team last season shot 11%. The average in the league is less than 10%. So no, they can't continue scoring the way they've been scoring. And actually, you can find out that all of that extra scoring is happening on the power play. Going into tonight's game, Dallas was 11 for 25 on the power play, which is a 44% conversion rate, which is awesome. But it's right now telling too much of the scoring story and not showing enough in the scoring story is that at 5-on-5, Dallas is the same old boring Dallas team they've been for a little while now. Dallas is still near the bottom of the league in many offensive metrics. Specifically, they rank 26th in expected goals for at 5-on-5. So this high scoring situation for Dallas, it's a mirage, and it's a great time to consider selling high on all your Dallas guys.
Yeah, I guess especially if you have like a Radulov, a Pavelski, if you believe what Brian's saying, like a John Klingberg, who I think is like in a really good spot. He's on the top power play. Like, he's definitely not, he could still be like a 50-point guy, but maybe not like a 70-point guy. I guess, yeah, it's a good opportunity to go out and see what you can get for these Dallas guys. It's scary to trade someone like Pavelski, who just has so many points, or Radulov, and we've seen them put up points like this in the past. So I feel like it's easy to, just convince yourself that, yeah, Pavelski and Radulov are back to how they were a couple seasons ago. And just last year was the mirage. But according to Brian, this high shooting percentage, it's not only according to Brian, it seems like according to past history, this high shooting percentage is not likely to sustain. And yeah, these games against Carolina, like that 11-shot game just makes you think, okay, something is going on with this team, though they did have some injuries in that game and Ben did come back. Okay, so let's go now to Winnipeg. So Brian said fleeting for Dallas. Now let's see Winnipeg, another team that's scoring a lot of goals. I'm going to give you a specific player for this one. Like Ben and Lewis already talked about how great of a pickup Kopp or Stasny make on Thursday's Short Shifts episode. And actually, we've seen some new lines. So I will actually mention that quickly before I get to the player I'll ask you about. I just remember I saw today, Winnipeg in practice, we're running Kopp with Scheifele and Ehlers, and then Kyle Connor with Stasny and Wheeler. So Wheeler and Scheifele split up, and you go to Game Day Lines, GameDayLineTweets.com. You could get the updated line combinations. Interesting stuff. Anyways, the one guy that's really been amazing this year, Brian's laughing. I'm not sure why. Am I rambling too much?
No, sorry.
You saw something funny on Twitter?
Yeah.
Share with the class.
It's a Dmitry Filipovich tweet of like a Hurricane player, like just doing the splits over the line at 5-on-5. I'm not sure why I find it so funny.
Oh yeah, so classic. Like it's not even a joke. It's just like a funny gif. And yeah, you're like my wife actually. She's sometimes on the couch just like laughing and it's like some dog doing something funny or whatever. But okay. Yeah, so the player I want to ask you about is Nikolai Ehlers, who's up to 11 points in 8 games. And this is like Nikolai Ehlers, the guy who never gets on the top power play. He's still putting up like well over a point per game. Obviously, I don't think he's going to keep up 113 point pace, like I said, but like Ehlers set a career high 67 point pace last season, 2019-20. Do you think his production looks sustainable enough for him to set a new career high this season?
Yeah, I do. He's looked really good. Nick Ehlers at 5-on-5, and so is his line. They have this outstanding expected goals for rate on the season. That's a full goal per 60 higher than Ehlers has ever had before. It's likely unsustainable. Like it's a huge jump. So we'll watch, see if that holds as more games are played. This is the caveat that I have to give, and it's frustrating, but still somewhat accurate, is that Nick Ehlers scored 10 points over 5 games against Ottawa and Edmonton, right? Of course, he's still going to play a huge chunk of his season against those two teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they make up a third of Winnipeg's opponents.
And throw in Vancouver. They're not like a hard team to score against, it seems.
Yeah, but Ottawa and Edmonton definitely seem, yeah, you're right. So I'm just like, I don't know. I'm a little baffled. Maybe this question is more for next season, like how he can do when he's not playing Ottawa and Edmonton presumptively this many times. Right now, Winnipeg has 4 games against Calgary on the docket. So I'm going to be interested to see what Ehlers and his line do in that time. But I don't want to take anything away from what Ehlers has done. He's looked legitimately good. And I think he is on pace to break his 67-point career high pace. And I love that he has Stastny this year. We talked about the Stastny acquisition, how that was good news for Ehlers. And soon he's going to have Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like this is going to be a second line that could be a first line. So I am very excited to see what they're all able to do together. Nick Ehlers, he's good.
Yeah, Brian, clearly you were too busy browsing Twitter, not listening to me before when I was talking about how Winnipeg actually changed up their lines. So who knows? Maybe Ehlers will stick on his new line with Scheifele and, well, right now it's Andrew Kopp. So we'll see what happens. But either way, it's 2 strong lines, and Ehlers is going to play with good players. That is for sure. I'd love to see what he could do on the top power play one day. It's kind of like Aaron Ekblad, and this year we're finally potentially seeing it. Ehlers, one day, right? One day on Keeping Karlsson, we'll be talking about top power play Nikolai Ehlers, and he's going to be like for sure top player in the league, like over point per game for sure. But we're not there yet. I should also, by the way, mention Adam Lowry is riding a 6-game point streak. I know it's like not sustainable. He's like a bottom 6 player, but can't argue with the recent success. And Winnipeg does play Monday, Tuesday next week. So I don't see any reason why if someone's listening to this on Monday, just grab Adam Lowry for a couple games, see if he can keep up the hot streak, and then you could always drop him. But I would grab him.
Yeah, run of 5 goals on 13 shots for Adam Lowry. So his production is fleeting, but also give him credit for having some pretty good underlying numbers. Seems to have taken a step forward this year compared to his last year's. Interesting. Another guy like Kopp, who seems to be like a potential candidate. I've been calling Kopp, I guess, on our Discord server because Ben and Lewis have done most of the talking about him. But maybe this year's Brian Rust is a guy who has transformed his game, or looks like he's transformed his game from being a middle sixer to a top sixer. And Adam Lowry, I don't think has quite done the same, but he's still done better. Like instead of a middle sixer, maybe he's looking more like a top 9, legitly capable guy to be a part of that. That was a really poor way to put it.
It was good.
But how about I ask you this? If you had to stream, and this is probably an irrelevant question for a lot of people, but here it is anyway. If you had to stream Adam Lowry or Dylan Dubé, who would you choose?
Lowry, I think.
Yeah, me too.
Because he's doing stuff. Dylan Dubé, show me something in the league. Like just because you're on a line with Matthew Tkachuk isn't enough for me anymore. Because I've seen a lot of players, including Mangiapane, your favorite guy, be on a line with Matthew Tkachuk and not do anything. Yeah, but Winnipeg's gonna be interesting, right? Because you're talking about Kopp has maybe like established himself as a top 6er, but now with Dubois coming in, he might push him down unless like Stastny goes to center the third line. But if Stastny goes down to center the third line, then your Adam Lowry, who's now established himself as a nice top 9 guy, he would get pushed down to be the 4th line center. So we'll see how the pieces fall once Dubois comes into the picture. Okay, next up in sustainable or fleeting, Tyler Toffoli, quiet yesterday versus Calgary, but who wasn't versus Jacob Markstrom, right? But before that, he had a stretch of 6 goals and 3 assists in 5 games, all all from a third line with Jesperi Kotkaniemi and either Joel Armia or Corey Perry. Only 2 of those 9 points, by the way, on the power play. So it's a lot of even strength production for Tyler Toffoli. So basically the flip of Nikolai Ehlers, right? He's getting power play time, but he's not getting the best even strength deployment. But it doesn't matter. He and Ehlers are both producing like crazy. So yeah, do you think what Tyler Toffoli is doing to at least some extent, is this sustainable, or do you think it's going to be fleeting? Like his career high is a 58-point pace back in 2015-16. Do you think he's going to beat that this year?
Yeah, I do. I think Tyler Toffoli looks great out there. And one thing that's really going for him is that he's got a bigger power play role so far this year in Montreal than he had previously in LA. That said, I do think that his current level of production is fleeting, right? When you're asking me sustainable or fleeting, it's like, is all of it going to go away or only some of it
I
going
tried
to
my
go
best, bro.
away?
I tried so hard to frame it and say, like,
You
no,
did.
is he going to beat his career high? And if you say
You did
yes, then that's
great.
sustainable.
Okay,
Okay.
good. Yeah, so I just want to make sure I'm using the right term to answer it. Sustainable in that he's likely to break his career high, fleeting in that he's not going to score 6 goals on every 24 shots he takes, with which goes without saying, right? I really do like Toffoli and think 60 points is in his future this season. He seems to have finally been unleashed, first in Vancouver and now in Montreal. Actually, Montreal as a whole seems kind of unleashed right now, which is uncharacteristic for a Claude Julien team, but they're scoring like crazy right now and kind of sustainably. The Habs lead the league in all situation goals per 60 minutes, and they're looking like a top 10 offensive team if you just look at them at 5-on-5 too, which means I wonder if I need to revisit my preseason take that 65 points would be more than enough to lead the Canadians in scoring, and only one player is likely to get there. Now I'm like, okay, I think Toffoli and Gallagher and Suzuki, and I'm just getting started, could probably each get to 65 points the way things are going.
Yeah, as long as they don't play Calgary and Jacob Markstrom too often, which we know they will. But aside from that, they're looking amazing. And they looked, like I said, they did look amazing against Calgary. It's just Markstrom stood on his head. So this Habs team is looking fantastic. A different Habs team than I think I've ever seen in my life, to be honest. Like they have like depth at offense. They've got decent defense. They've got the best goalie. Like I don't see why they can't be the best team in the North and go on a nice run this year, not to jinx them. Okay, so next up, let's go to the Florida Panthers, who have 3 new acquisitions this year that are all like so good. Like it's pretty crazy. This team let Mike Hoffman and Evgeny Dadonov walk. Like they did, we were thinking going to the year, man, like this team is looking shallow now. Like who have they brought in? I guess they traded Mike Matheson for Patrick Hornqvist. They got Carter Verhaeghe and Anthony Duclair, who are like, maybe Duclair seemed like a bit of a, maybe he could be good because he had a good stretch in Ottawa. But man, like all 3 of these guys have been insane. First of all, the Panthers are 4-0-1 to start the year, and I wrote that before they just beat Detroit today, so make that 5-0-1. And a big reason is these 3 new players, compared by the way to Dadonov and Hoffman, who are doing bupkis for their teams. And so it seems like a real slam dunk of Verhaeghe and Duclair, each with 6 points in 5 games, all at even strength, playing with Alex Barkov on the top line, who also has 6 points. That's going into today. And let's take a look here. Another goal for Carter Verhaeghe, nothing for Duclair. So Verhaeghe, holy cow, like at him, like regardless of what Brian says, at him, like he should be owned, probably Duclair. And also Patrick Hornqvist, 4 goals and 2 assists in 5 games going into today, and 4 of those points came on the power play. I know that Hornqvist did he get another goal today? Holy cow, man. All 3 of these guys are great. So what do you think? Obviously, I'm just blushing and like maybe biasing the question, but like, do you think this is sustainable? Again, like obviously not point per game, but like are Carter Verhaeghe, Anthony Duclair, and Patrick Hornqvist all going to be like for sure holds, never even thinking of dropping these guys all throughout the rest of the season in fantasy?
I'm going to say Hornqvist has a good chance. He's looked good again. And the same thing I'll say about Verhaeghe and Duclair's. All 3 of these guys are getting a new lease on their NHL careers compared to the opportunity they've had recently. Although I guess Duclair has had some great opportunity, but we just haven't seen him in it long enough. But I'm not sure that the production I'm seeing from all these guys is sustainable. Like I would say Florida is more like Dallas in the examples we've covered so far, in that they are not the best looking offensive team, but they're being buoyed by a hot power play that scored 5 goals on their first 15 opportunities this year. I'm very open to seeing where this goes, but of course it's easy to say they're all not going to be scoring 6 points every 5 games. One thing that's nice to see is that Florida's power play is still clicking without Mike Hoffman so far, and with that drama on their blue line as well, not really impacting them between Yandel and Ekblad and Quenville. So I think Verhaeghe and Duclair and Hornqvist might all exceed preseason expectations. So in that sense, what they're doing is sustainable. But I don't know that they're all going to be rosterable the whole way through.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to see that now, but obviously, like I mean, it's just like Barkov and Huberdeau are clearly like so good. Like
Yeah.
not to take away from these three, but like they're getting elevated, and I feel like I'm getting deja vu from the Islanders where they lose John Tavares, and you think, all right, well they're gonna stink now. Then they were like better than before, and here it's like addition by subtraction, I guess. Like we go into the year saying like Florida, man, they stink, and now all of a sudden like they're looking better than ever. So it's weird, wild stuff, and we'll see how it goes. It's 6 games in. They've won 5 of them.
Yeah.
Lost
There's
the other
just
one
been
in
so,
overtime. So.
like, Florida has also missed games for COVID, right? So it's been hard to really get a sense of who they are. They've played fewer games than almost everyone in the league. So we're only 6 games in. I feel like we're recording a podcast about them. I feel like the way we're talking about them is the way we were talking about every team 2 weeks ago. So like I'm open. I'm open is all I'm saying. I'm not buying in wholeheartedly to any of these guys necessarily. Like I said I liked Hornqvist, but for Hagee and Duclair, let me watch a little more.
Okay, well, definitely add that. If they're in free agency, stop.
Yeah,
I like them
add
better
them
than like,
now.
yeah, like Nick Ritchie or whatever. Like
Yeah,
he's a streamer. These guys are ads for sure. Another guy who's an ad that like I can't believe I didn't take. I like beating myself up over it is James Van Riemsdyk, who had an assist on Saturday versus the Islanders on a 3-game point streak going into today's game versus the Islanders, where three more assists. So James Van Riemsdyk is on a huge roll, and this is a guy who like had a strong start to the year, and he just stayed in free agency in tier 1 of the cupful for a long time during that stretch, just because I think everyone thought, it's JVR, he goes hot, then he like disappears. But so far that hasn't happened. By the way, all his 3 goals today versus the Islanders were all of his 3 assists today versus the Islanders came on goals from Joel Farabee. So he's another guy who I think is available in free. Well, he's probably still available in free agency because he hasn't done much lately. JVR probably taken at this point, though. I would think, but I looked yesterday when I was preparing the show, and JVR was only 37% rostered on Yahoo. I'd imagine that's shooting up as we speak. Brian, I know you love JVR, so I think this is going to be an easy answer. But like last year, he seemed to struggle. Like he only put up a 50-point pace. So are you seeing something different this year? Do you think this is sustainable and he's going to for sure stay rostered by anyone who was lucky to get him in free agency last week? And he's going to, crush that 50-point pace and keep up somewhat what he's been doing?
I mean, it's really nice to see him getting more time with the man advantage this season, playing up on that top unit for the most part with Giroux, Voracek, and Patrick. So that's really lovely because last year, James Van Riemsdyk, he was good at 5-on-5, but didn't like his sub. He was good at 5-on-5, but he had this power play deployment, often on the second unit. And also, when he was on the ice for the power play, variance was not going in his favor. This year, it's the opposite story. He's got top power play. Variance is working for him. 5 goals on 25 shots, 4 goals on 11 shots on the power play, which is really great. His 5-on-5 production is way up. That's great. That's not sustainable. But I do think he can just repeat what he did last year at 5-on-5 with a top power play role if he can hold it. And you're looking at a guy who is going to be rosterable all season long. Like I've fallen for Van Riemsdyk before, but I think a better season than last year is definitely sustainable so long as he holds this top power play role. And also last year, there were a few bad spots in that top 9 in Philly that he could land at 5-on-5. This year, those bad spots aren't really around. Like I like him almost anywhere in the top 9 this season. So even again, like I keep saying, I'm not worried about his 5-on-5 production. I've liked what I've seen in the past. There's just been that power play piece missing, but he's got it now.
Yeah, so it's great, and definitely grab him. I guess like in the same conversation as for Hagee, like and or maybe even higher. I don't know. I guess you're probably higher on JVR. It would be hard for me to not want for Hagee with what he's been doing, but I guess
I would
JVR, yeah,
say, yeah, like they're comparable. I knew
yeah.
you'd bring it back to the Florida comparison. I think James Van Riemsdyk is probably in the same class as Verhaeghe and Duclair.
But Hornqvist higher than both, right? Which is
Yeah, yeah,
makes me
exactly.
happy. I thought he was done. Like we were talking about Patrick Hornqvist back when he was on Pittsburgh. Like, he was on the 3rd line, sometimes even getting bumped from the top power play. It seemed like he was like, his career was over now, or at least in terms of like being a productive fantasy option. And like this year, he's really turning it around so far. So good for him. Okay, I guess I should bring up that Travis Konechny got healthy scratched for Saturday's game for Philly. He's back playing today. It's 3-3 right now in the 3rd for anyone who cares. He hasn't done anything so far. Like every goal, all 3 of the Philly goals have been Joel Farabee, assisted by JVR and defenseman. So I don't know. I guess, but should we be worried about Konechny? Like, it's weird that he got scratched, right? But at the same time, he seems like he should be one of the best players on the team, and he was doing really well, though he's cooled off quite a bit since his big 4-point game versus Pittsburgh 2 games into the season. So I don't know. Last year he was great. I'm not really framing this very well. I'm just in general. What do you think about Konechny at this point?
Yeah, I'm not worried. I think it's dumb that he was scratched. I could probably go on a reasonably long
You hate
rant here.
NHL coaches. You already ranted about the Detroit coach. So I guess it's the same thing, right? You don't like when they're not playing their best players.
I mean, scratching your top player should be a last resort, right? And I just don't know that Alain Vigneault has used all the tools in his toolbox, or maybe he has, and he just has a limited toolbox, in which case maybe he should grow as a coach and be better. I've made this analogy a lot in our Discord community that I think coaching should be like teaching, and it's not a teacher move. It's not a good teacher move to just exclude this guy who's not doing what you want him to do. It's like there's probably some deeper problem that just scratching isn't going to solve. Sure, you can speak that language and it will be understood by Konechny, but I just don't think it's the exact right way to address whatever the underlying reason is for Konechny disappointing Vigneault.
Hey, I mean, easy for us to say behind our podcasting microphones. I've never coached NHL games, so I don't know if coaching should be. I know that you and I once coached a girls basketball team over at Hill Academy, and we lost every single game. So I don't know if.
But we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. I blame it on the players. I think we had good strategies.
You know what? We didn't scratch enough players on that elementary school girls basketball team.
Thinking back to it now, didn't we have like only one good player? Remember there was like one girl that was good, and like it was so tempting to just say always to pass to her. But I think we were trying to like make it fun and letting other people get on, and it was a mistake. Clearly, we should have just gone to the one good player, which is the opposite of what Vigneault's doing.
If only we lived in the same city, we could coach a softball team together and scratch the best player on it and see what happened.
Okay, so next, well, only if they're, struggling. You need to.
Also, I like that you said, like, I like to criticize coaches from behind my podcast. My group, like,
yeah.
Is that?
You're like giving advice, like, you're not an NHL coach. You're like, yeah, no, I think that coaching.
I acknowledge
Brian's
that.
Gonna write the book. Like coaching is like teaching.
The book is going to be called Podcast Microphone Warrior.
Yeah, I don't know. I just can't comment. Maybe Vigneault knows what he's doing. We'll see. Like, we'll see if Philly goes on and wins a cup.
You're just going to blindly appeal to authority. You're not going to be like, maybe.
I don't know.
Okay. I just feel like there have to be enough. There's only 31 coaching jobs in the NHL. There has to be some coach capable of getting the best out of their players without resorting to scratching them.
We'll see. I don't know. Maybe. Didn't Philly win that game?
It just tells me that he's not a very good coach. Like if I know a teacher who is just constantly disciplining their students for whatever reason, this and that, it's like, man, maybe you need to change. Maybe something's wrong.
I mean, he's not constantly doing it. I think this is the first time he's scratched.
I think Konechny should scratch Vigneault.
Okay. So one more sustainable or fleeting before we end the show on cold streaks. On Vancouver, Nils Hoglander, this guy, I added him like, a day into the season. Like I didn't even want him. Like he was like my 5th choice of free agents, and somehow everyone else got bid ahead of me on my fab priority list. And I ended up with Hoglander. Then all of a sudden JT Miller was like on the COVID list. So then next thing we knew, Hoglander was on the top power play. And like, I was like, oh, this guy's great. Like, I'm so happy I have him. And then he did well for a little bit. Then he went cold. And then I kept on thinking, okay, I'm going to drop him at some point. There's no, like, Miller's back. He's on the second line, but not on the second power play or only on the second power play. But then like Vancouver kept on having like Monday, Wednesday schedules. I was like, I'm not going to drop someone that's going to give me games when I could drop someone who's not even going to get on my roster. And then eventually I dropped a goalie, and like somehow I still have him on my couple team. That's the end of the story. And all of a sudden now I'm like really happy that Vancouver had that schedule, because Hoglander quietly is on a great run. He's got 5 points in his last 6 games after his goal versus the Jets yesterday. I saw a tweet with fancy charts. So Brian, I sent this to you so that you can understand this thing. But apparently, according to Account for Hockey, Hoglander has been like really good this year. That was like the first tweet. And the next tweet was a bunch of like charts of what are we looking at here? Isolated impact with even strength offense, power play, X expected goals 4 per 60, all that good stuff. Apparently Hoglander's been awesome.
It's like you just painted a picture with your words, Eli, of what the charts show and demonstrate.
So yeah, like he's on the second line, but playing with Bo Horvat, who's really good, and Tanner Pearson, who's like, I mean, Tanner Pearson was great last year, was worth rostering in most leagues. Seems like Hoglander's probably like that. Vancouver plays Monday, Tuesday next week, so I'm obviously not going to drop him again, mainly because of his schedule. But if he continues to get me points every game, how can I let him go? I really like him.
Yeah, so just for context, the charts you're mentioning, one is an isolated impact chart from a hockey viz, which we use often, and the other is an RAPM chart from Evolving Wild. You might be familiar with those. It's like the ones that have like the blue bars up or the red bars down, depending on how a player does on a few offensive metrics like goals for and shot attempts for and expected goals for. So they're great resources. And also the Twitter you mentioned, Elon, account then the new number 4, then word hockey is a pretty good follow. So you can go check them out. But yeah, Hoglander's on this nice little run. Almost all of it happened too while he was playing less than 13 minutes a night, often between 10 and 12 minutes. But Hoglander saw nearly 15 minutes last night against Winnipeg and has 3 shots on goal in each of his last 3 games. I love that he's playing with Horvat, and there's not really anyone on the depth chart nipping at his heels for that spot. So Hoglander has top 6 deployment, a few shots a night, no atrociously odd-looking variance numbers, rising time on ice once again for the first time since he was replacing JT Miller in those first couple games of the season. Seems like a guy who could be worth holding on to see where this goes. I'm not saying like lock him in for 60 points, but he falls into the category of those Panthers and James Van Riemsdyk as somebody who I'm very interested to see where this goes.
Oh, I mean, I love hearing you say that. I would assume he was behind the Panthers and James Van Riemsdyk.
Yeah,
But
no, I know I've been at you. Like, he's been on your roster all season. I've been like, yeah, Hoglander seems like an obvious drop. Like, if not today, then tomorrow. And today, I'm saying he's more rosterable than I would have said he was last week. So he's making a real positive impact and hanging around, looking like an NHLer, which is fantastic.
yeah, so at the very least, grab him for Monday, Tuesday if he's available in free agency in your leagues. Like I take him over Adam Lowry, for example, who I brought up as like a good guy to stream in. Okay, so let's do some cold streaks to end the show. Brian, like let's start in Edmonton. The Oilers are actually playing right now. They're up 2-1 against Ottawa. It's like we're not even halfway through the first period, so I think this is going to be a high scoring game. But like I want to talk about Jesse Puljujarvi because we actually ended last week's show with Steve Laidlaw, where it looked like Puljujarvi was going to be playing on the top line with McDavid, and then like we stopped recording, and then I started editing, and while that was happening, I was watching this game, and like Puljujarvi had like probably his best game of the year, right? He had an assist, he had 6 shots on goal versus the Jets, and then the next day, a Monday morning in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, where there's like bids every single day, Puljujarvi, like people went crazy. Brian, I know you added him for a big amount of your fab budget. He went in tier 1 for $33, and the people who've added him have been rewarded with no points in 3 games this week so far and only 4 shots. We'll see how he does in today's Sunday's game versus the Sens. But like, how much longer of a leash should people be giving Puljujarvi if he happens to like, if he again has no points tonight? Are you, Brian, still going to be holding on because you spent so much to get him? Because it's interesting. Like, you could look at someone like Dominic Cahoon, who's also on a good line. He's been playing with Draisaitl, and like, you know, at first everyone was excited about him, and then like he went really cold, and at some point Draisaitl or Cahoon got dropped in like a bunch of leagues, and actually Cahoon now has goals in 2 straight games. I see he's scored today. So if anything, you'd think like, okay, grab Cahoon. He's the one who's hot and Puljujarvi's cold. But I feel like still at this point, people are excited about Puljujarvi and still like meh on Dominic Cahoon. So I'm curious to get your current take on, did everyone make a mistake on Monday rushing for Puljujarvi and spending big? Or do you think there's still something here because he's on the McDavid line and you always want the person on the McDavid line?
I'm one of those people. I fully admit and confess, and am also showing, like, disclosing my bias here as somebody who did go out and like make a pretty big splash to get Puljujarvi. I spent 17 fab dollars in my cupful division, and no one else bid, so I threw 17 fab dollars down the toilet to get him. I still think he's worth holding so long as he keeps playing on the top line and isn't getting pushed off. Like, I think every game that he continues on the top line, that's a positive sign. And I think if he's there long enough, if he can keep his spot there long enough without getting pushed off, then good things are bound to happen. I did see in the last game Edmonton played before we recorded this against Toronto, Zach Cashin and Josh Archibald took some turns on the top line. And curiously, during the last 4 minutes of regulation, Puljujarvi didn't even touch the ice for any of McDavid's 3 shifts. But as a Puljujarvi manager, I'm still looking at the bigger picture, seeing that he's still with McDavid. He seems to be like on a short leash, but is still holding that deployment. So I'm willing to wait another 1 or 2 games to see how it shakes out. If he's off the top line by then, or if he's still putting up goose eggs, then yeah, I'm going to reconsider. But I think we're still in a place where it's possible Puljujarvi is going to click on the top line and then doesn't leave. I don't think he's that valuable to the Oilers right now anywhere else in their lineup. I feel like this is just the sensible place for him. So again, I'm biased. I'm invested in him. I won't fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy and be like, I invested all this in him, and I won't give him up, but I might give him a longer look. If he's in free agency, though, my honest answer is I wouldn't rush to grab him until I start seeing something. But if he's already on your roster and you have limited moves to make, then maybe you just hold on to him like I will.
I don't know, Brian. I think everything you're saying is just sounds like so much just like what I used to think about Zach Cassian or something. Well, I mean, he's there, and while he's there, he'll probably just like what is even going to happen, right? He's going to maybe get an assist every once in a while where he gives it to McDavid, then he goes and does it all himself. Like I don't know. For me, I'm like not interested. Let's see if he does something today to change our mind. Edmonton just scored their third goal of the game.
God.
Another non-Puljujärvi.
Yeah, so if Puljujärvi gets no points tonight on what against a very vulnerable Ottawa team without Shabbat, right? Like their D pairs tonight are just awful. I mean, they're not much better than any other given night. But yeah, if Puljujärvi does nothing tonight, I'm going to take a good hard look at him, because I also know that if I dropped him today, I don't think anyone is rushing to snap him up either. So it's definitely leaning towards ignore him until you see anything from him.
Yeah, you made a post on our like group chat with Ben and Lewis, and you like posted your roster. You're trying to like tell us about how you have no one to drop. You're like, guys, who's my streamer? I have like no one to stream. And I was like, how about the guy who's done nothing all season? Is he potentially your streamer?
But yeah. Well, I mean, he had 13 shots over 3 games when I picked him up, and that was really exciting. And his ice time was solid, and only 2 shots in his next 2 games, no points. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about Puljujärvi, but not a lot of reasons to be terribly invested. Like, still very speculative.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if he was awesome, if he was like Yamamoto, he would have done something already. So anyways, we'll see. It's too early to tell, but I think I know. But okay, I was also going to ask you about Tyson Barrie. Like, he looked like a bust. Like, this guy was bumped from the top power play, was having a slow start to the season, but all of a sudden he has surged back. Actually, it took games against his former team, the Leafs. He got 3 assists in the last 2 games, both against the Leafs. He's reclaimed his top power play spot. I think he just scored a power play goal to make it 3-1 here halfway through the first period. So yeah, Tyson Barrie was dropped in your league at this point. Like, rush, go get him, right? Like, I guess it took him some time to get acclimated, but right now things are looking great.
They sure are. And especially, I think he just scored the goal that chased.
I said that, Brian.
No, I was sorry. I wasn't going to just repeat it.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. Fine. Yeah, looking like a great season. I sort of recall last season in Toronto being kind of similar, right? He was a huge disappointment when he got there. All his managers were like, what do I do with this guy? He's doing nothing. How long do I wait? And then eventually he took off when he was getting exactly the right deployment, when he was put on the top power play to stay and was sheltered reasonably well at 5-on-5. So he wasn't making mistakes that lost him power play privileges. So maybe Edmonton is figuring that out too. It's nice to see him having some opportunities to build some confidence out there. So I would be very happy to hold on to him so long as he stays on the top unit, which honestly, I think he will. The fact that he's already been off and back on there is encouraging to me.
Yeah, it's also encouraging that if it happens again that he's off, you at least have this evidence that maybe he'll get back on again, because we've already seen it happen. But who knows? Maybe he'll hold it now. Obviously, we don't want to pay too much attention to a game versus the Ottawa Senators, who it's just like Matt Murray's already been pulled. Oh man, the Sens, that was looking like not the best trade and signing that they could have made over the summer. Okay, let's switch over to former Sen and the namesake of our podcast, Erik Karlsson, who definitely has not started the season the way I was hoping for. Like, I was thinking, okay, he's healthy now, it's going to be great. 3 assists in 8 games for the Sharks. And now San Jose is going to miss the first couple games of next week because of Vegas's COVID cancellations. So Karlsson's just becoming a tougher and tougher hold in those shallower leagues. People are still asking us questions about, should I be adding like a Rasmus Anderson or a Noah Dobson or a Ty Smith? All players who are like on their top power plays and like producing, doing well. And then you have Erik Karlsson doing nothing. Or like recently JD asked on Discord if he should trade Erik Karlsson and listed a bunch of options, including like Fox. I think it's the 3rd, 4th time we mentioned Adam Fox's episode. So, but Torrey Krug, Dahlin, Ekblad, McAvoy. And you actually responded saying you still believe in Erik Karlsson, which made me happy. I was thinking like, yeah, trade him for any of those guys at this point. Like, I'm like too quick to give up maybe. So I'm curious to know, like, is there something you're seeing in Erik Karlsson, under the hood that makes us think that he's going to be the guy that we want him to be and why we named our podcast after him? Why his name is on my hat that I'm wearing right now? now? Or is this 3 points in 8 games a sign that this might not be the bounce back year that I was hoping for?
I'm really, really legitimately concerned about Erik Karlsson. I'm putting on a brave face and thinking, like you, okay, I think he's healthy or as healthy as he can get. San Jose is going to be bad, but it's not going to be like last year. And I just don't see any reason to be optimistic other than uh, me believing that the upside still exists. Like, I don't know if this is me being overly stubborn and I'm just having too hard a time letting go. Well, I see that Erik Karlsson, he looks bad. The Sharks look bad, especially when Karlsson is on the ice. He's got nothing to show for the time he's spent on the ice while being bad. Uh, I don't know, man. Like, I'm worried. I remember when he was traded from Ottawa, a lot of people who like didn't really know me well were like, "You're gonna have to change the name of the podcast that you host, about Karlsson." I'm like, it's not an Ottawa Senators podcast, guys. So no, I'm not gonna have to. But now it's just like Eric, don't embarrass us. Our podcast is named after you. If our podcast is named after somebody who's barely rosterable, I just don't know how much credit will be given by our audience.
Oh no. Well, and sometimes I've been able to say like, well, it's okay. There's lots of Karlssons in the league. We could just switch over and be about William Karlsson, but he's also struggling this year. Only 3 points in 7 games for William Karlsson, who's gone back to center Marchessault and Riley Smith. I think it was a lot better for him last year when he was centering Stone and Pacioretty in the playoffs at the end of last season. But William Karlsson only 3 points in 7 games. Riley Smith, by the way, also 3 points in 7 games. And again, just like the Sharks, these Vegas players are not going to play to start next week because of these. And with Vegas, who knows how long they'll be off, right? Because they're the team that had the exposure to COVID. So at this point, especially if you can't like just stash these guys in IR, which I guess you can't for like these postponed games, would you be holding on to Marchessault and Smith, or would you be like, do you see a reason why do you see why they can't get back to what they were doing last year? Like, is this just a cold stretch, or are they also concerning you just like Eric is?
Add these guys to the list of players we've talked about underperforming who are on Micah Cupful team. I own both William Karlsson and Riley Smith.
Oh
And
boy.
yes, I've noticed they're not doing well. Both look fine, but I mean, they're also not going to set the world on fire, even in their likely best case scenario of 55, 60-ish points. So kind of like Kyle Palmieri in that respect. Also, though, Vegas is using them a little less, 60 to 90 seconds less time on ice at 5-on-5 each night compared to last year for them. I'm not thinking of dropping Smith or Karlsson in our 250 deep cupful division, but you might consider it in a shallower format until they get their legs under them. I don't think anyone's going to jump on them. If you drop one first between Riley Smith and William Karlsson, probably drop Smith because William Karlsson is still on the top power play, gets a little bump for that. I hope he can stay there, though, because that top power play has been real cold. And I'm hoping they don't try and shuffle him off as one way to try and solve that. Vegas has started the season by scoring just 3 times on 26 power play opportunities, ranked 29th in the NHL with just an 11.5% conversion rate.
Okay, let's go to another former Sen. I think we mentioned him, Mike Hoffman on St. Louis. Doing nothing, 1 assist for his 3rd point of the season in 7 games versus the Ducks on Saturday. Doesn't look like he's gotten anything so far. The game is still going on. What is it? 2-1 St. Louis. And yeah, Mike Hoffman once again. Oh no, what am I talking about? He has an assist today. So I don't know. Should we just pass on the Mike Hoffman conversation? Like, I don't know. I'm disappointed. He's on the 3rd line. He's on the 2nd power play. This is not what we were expecting from him. He was dropped in one of my leagues and then he was quickly re-added off of waivers. I'm wondering if I made a mistake not going in on him. Like, what do you think? Is it snoozer time? Like, if we have Nick Ritchie out there, I feel like it would be really hard to not want to grab top power play Nick Ritchie and hold on to non-top power play Mike Hoffman.
Yeah, I think the reason to not do that, and I'm not saying this should be what you do, but the reason to not do that would be that Richie's not going to be on the top power play all season, or at least I don't know that he will. And of course, yes, Hoffman's on the 2nd power play unit, but if I want to give his managers reason for optimism, St. Louis power play kind of sucks so far. 3 power play goals on 25 opportunities heading into tonight's show that we're recording right now. So like essentially Vegas, 12% conversion rate, 27th ranked power play in the league. So if that top power play isn't working, it's like maybe like you have Mike Hoffman. Why don't you see if you can make it work? Like let him bump Jaden Schwartz off the top unit and see how, like, I don't know that would exactly work and they might have to rejig exactly how it's run, but just something to consider. Of course, the St. Louis power play also could be struggling because they are adjusting to Krug instead of Pietrangelo and trying to get through those growing pains. But I don't know. So Okay, this has all been maybe a little misleading because I think Hoffman is snoozing and I don't think he's worth rostering while he's on the second power play. I'm just trying to give some hope to anybody who has him on their roster or thinking of adding him. It's like the second you see him on the top power play, go for it. In the meantime, yeah, I don't think he's rosterable, especially because, as you mentioned, Elon, he's not shooting. Just one game out of 7 so far this season where he's put more than 2 shots on net, which is not like him and basically a function of him getting second power play billing.
Yeah, man, what a surprise. This lesson of like players going to new teams is like big this year. Like a lot of players, it happened last year, right? We've talked about like PK Subban and Jacob Trouba. We thought they would be good on their new teams. Now add Mike Hoffman to the list. Like it's a little bit scary. Tyson Barrie, I was going to bring as an example, though. That seems to be working out now. Okay, and then the last snoozer player I wanted to ask about, definitely not a snoozer, but someone I'm a little bit concerned about. What's going on with Roman Josi? We've been getting a lot of questions about the reigning Norris winner. He had a power play assist on Saturday versus Tampa, but that was only his 3rd point in 8 games on the season. Like last year when Josi had that amazing 77-point pace season, it was weird, right? Like everyone on the team, like all the forwards were struggling, like Forsberg, Arvidsson, like obviously Johansson, like Duchesne, they all did a lot worse than we expected. Yet somehow Roman Josi had like the best season of his career. Now it's kind of like flipped. Like Forsberg and Arvidsson, they're looking good, but Roman Josi is the one who's struggling. So like, is it possible that all of these players who we think should be good can be good in the same year? Or is like if Forsberg and Arvidsson are going to have a good year, does that mean we should be expecting a bit of a down year for Josi?
Through 8 games, Roman Josi has been on the ice for just 2 goals scored. That's it. And of course, he hasn't gotten a point on any of them, which of course is very frustrating for anybody rostering him in fantasy. That said, it hasn't been as bad as that result shows. The Predators are shooting less than 3% while Josi is on the ice at 5-on-5. So I'm not that worried, but one reason I still don't think he's quite going to get to the heights of last year is because last season, Josi was the entire power play. This season, for the 3rd year in a row, that power play is still awful. It was awful last season, but somehow Roman Josi survived it, like you said. The power play in Nashville, though, is now entering its 3rd season of just being straight up broken. They're in that territory of St. Louis and Vegas that I just pooped on to say how bad they were. 4 power play goals on 33 opportunities, 12% conversion rate to start the season. And yeah, Roman Josi isn't even getting in on that fun the way he was last season. So Nashville is, in one hand, doing worse on the power. Sorry. So this all puts us in a place where Roman Josi, is not doing well on a power play that doesn't give a whole lot of opportunities to do well. And at even strength, he's a little snake bitten. He's also underperforming his rate stats from the last several years. And I'm not exactly sure what the reason is behind that and if there's cause for greater alarm. But right now, there's enough bad variance going against him that I'm not getting overly concerned about Josi. I think you should definitely have adjusted your expectations, though. And I think we mentioned this in the preseason that we don't see another 77-point season coming from him, but that he should still comfortably be in that 55, 60-point range that he had been for several seasons before that. I'm still counting on that, but right now things are definitely looking really rough.
Yeah, but honestly, I don't even remember you saying that. Like 55, 60, I would have like scoffed so much in the offseason. And if you think that, then that means probably people should be looking to trade him while he still has that high name value. Like I'm sure a lot of people are just assuming that it's a slow start. And maybe you can get someone who's on a much better pace than that. So interesting. I got to think of some names. Tweeted us. I don't know. But like, yeah, it's concerning. And like last year was weird. And maybe you're right that like that was the anomaly and he's going to go back to what he was doing the years prior, which is, closer to like a 60-point pace.
For what it's worth, our patron projection project had him at a mean of 69 points with the minimum 59 and the maximum 85. So yeah, he's in danger of meeting that minimum projection and is no chance of hitting that maximum projection, of course. Like we knew last year was weird, and I think we thought, I don't know. I guess now you've made me unsure about what I said about him preseason. I feel like I've been pretty specific in saying he's not going to get up to that point pace he had last season, but maybe he has a higher ceiling than we previously thought. Right now, I would just put him back down to the same place he had been for the several years before that.
Okay, I'll trust you. I don't remember you saying that, but I'm sure you did. Maybe I just wasn't listening. Okay, so this has been a blast. We've gone through like a million players. Hopefully people have enjoyed this show. Before we sign off, we have that big announcement, Brian, that we teased at the start of the show. We've been teasing a little bit throughout. Are you curious if anyone has dropped Roman Josi? And like, okay, here's the thing that I love about what we're about to announce is when you're on Yahoo, and I think a big part of sometimes when I'm making a decision of a player to add or a player to drop, I like to look at the percent rostered, right? And see like how many leagues is this person being added in? Or I like to look at the recent transaction history and see how many leagues has this player been added in versus how many leagues has this player been dropped in. But the problem is Yahoo just has like every single league there, right? And there's a lot of clown leagues out there with people that don't know what they're doing. But we actually are running our own like network of leagues in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, where like I said, we had 23 divisions of players who all know what they're doing. And being a participant in the Cupful has just gotten a little bit better because we've got a website. The Cupful has a website now, and it is insane. Okay, get this. This is a website, so it's cupful.com or keepingkarlsson.com/league. We'll link to it in the show notes. You got to check it out. This is like up-to-date stats of everything going on in the Cupful. Like you can see if you're playing, you can see where your standing is in the whole league in terms of total points. You can look at like player stats, like percentage owned in the Cupful, how many of the 23 leagues is this player rostered on. You see like the recent transactions, ad drops. This is like a useful tool for people playing in the Cupful or just anyone, I think, playing fantasy, because they have access to all this data from people who, like, again, know what they're doing. Brian, I don't know, maybe I'll throw it to you. Like maybe you could give thanks to all the people who have built this amazing site, but like I'm even only scratching the surface of the data and interesting stuff on this site. It is phenomenal.
Yeah, so John Newhold, who you heard on the auction, the Tier 1 auction podcast co-hosting with me, is behind this, and you're going to hear more of him too. I don't know if I'm revealing anything too soon, but
do it. Reveal
okay.
it all.
He and Marcus, our Stat Attack hosts, are going to be like really ramping up production on the show before long. So we're really excited for the return of that. Also, our patron Kevin has been just incredible at also like contributing. He learned freaking Tableau to help make this website and like provide all these great stats. For anyone who doesn't know what Tableau is, it's something I've tried to teach myself and failed for the last 3 years. And Kevin like learned it in a day, maybe 2. So way to go, Kevin, for being amazing. Thank you for all your hard work. And of course, Marcus has also been a part of all the conversations that have built this freaking website that has like literally any way you want to slice how to measure performance in the Cupful, both manager performance, like if you want to see how Elon or my teams are doing, or your own team, if you're in the Cupful compared to everybody else, and a lot of different measures that account for luck and expected wins and division strength. It's amazing. And then also to get info on players and how many divisions they're rostered in, how much fab people are paying for them. You can basically take all the data that is churned out daily by transactions and managers and games in the Cupful and just see it in a million different ways. I can't even explain it. Like you're going to have to go to the website, cupful.com, kkupfl.com, and see it all for yourself. Play around. It might not all make sense right off the top, but if you're patient and take some time to play around with the charts that are there, man, you will be rewarded.
Yeah, it's a crazy site. And Brian, you even like slipped in there that another benefit of being in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League is we have our own podcast, which, like you said, the first episode is dropping tomorrow. We're going to link to it in the show notes, a Cupful Stat Attack. If you're a patron, don't worry. We're going to share all the links everywhere with Marcus and John Newhold. And also, by the way, you brought up how Kevin, prepared a bunch of the stats on Tableau, but the person who actually put this website together and designed it is John Newhold, who's helped us a lot. He was great in that auction episode. And John, like, I want to take a second to shout out like John's website creation skills, because this site is great. Like not only does it have, by the way, all the Cupful stats and everything, it's also got like just cool stuff like our Twitter timeline, a bunch of Twitter timelines. You could listen to shows, like all this embedded cool. It's wild. And John actually has a company called JN Software Consulting that does this kind of thing, and they're so good at it. You'll see from this site as an example that they help organizations with their software and professional skills training. They build databases and web applications. They provide consulting to help people with their projects, just like they did with us. Like there's a reason why John's fantasy team is called Microsoft Excel. By the way, John's team was the one that won the like fast track last year, or would have if that existed. Like they're the highest scoring team in all of the Cupful. And the reason why he calls his team Microsoft Excel is because he knows what he's doing with Microsoft products like Adobe, a whole ton more. we told John we need to shout out this company because if you have a business and you need a website, check out jnsoftware.ca. You can get free resources like their blog and free monthly webinars. And at jnsoftware.ca/audit, you can get a free training and consulting audit. Their team will talk to you to understand your organization's unique needs and then provide a comprehensive no obligation report customized for your strengths and gaps with suggestions on how to move forward. Anyways, I wanted to mention that. But also, check out kakupful.com. Check out jnsoftware.ca if you want John to like make a website for you that's like in this company that's like even close to as amazing as this. You're looking good. Brian, I'm just so stoked about everything going on. Stat Attack tomorrow. Oh man, all these great people.
There's a lot of amazing things going on. And the bottom line is that we want to make the fantasy hockey experience as amazing for all our listeners and, of course, the people playing in the Cupful as possible, which is why there is now a site. Honestly, the stats on our site about the Cupful are better than the stats on the NHL site about the NHL. So you've got a website and a podcast dedicated to your fantasy league. It's incredible. So if you want to learn more, we actually have you can become a patron to join the Cupful. You can go to patreon.com/keepingkarlsson, or you can go to cupful.com and there's a button that tells you exactly how to go through it.
Yeah. And then again, like I said, check out jnsoftware.ca for your website needs. But okay, thank you everyone so much for listening to the show. This is over a couple hour show. So this is one of our longer ones. There's a lot going on in the NHL every week. I'm sure next week will be 2.5, 3 hours. You don't mind, Brian, right? Like you're not usually too tired by the end of these. But I guess with that, we should finally end it. So let's cue the outro music. And then Brian, why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dauber Hockey and powered by our wonderful and beautiful patrons. Logo art courtesy of BrandonWeeb.com. All music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dauber Hockey Frozen Pool. Dauber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, Charting Hockey, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and Roto World, and Yahoo!
And kakupful.com. I was using it to look at some percent rostered stats. So we'll have to add that to that list. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And stay subscribed to our feed because you're going to have your short shifts with Ben and Lewis coming to you Wednesday morning.
Can't wait to hear all the follow-up on many of the guys we've talked about and some guys who we haven't even. So much will happen in the next 48 hours, and Ben and Lewis have got you covered. Until then, remember, fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Okay. I hope I did a good job promoting John's website.
I hope so, too.
It's hard, but he's good. He's good at making websites. Okay. So, Brian, we still have an ad to read. People who are watching live, you can feel free to stop now, but we have an ad to read if you want to listen to one more. This one is going to be automatically put into some things. What have we gotten ourselves into, Brian?
It's supposed to be dynamic. We shouldn't do it somewhere where it's going to live forever, like on the YouTube feed.
Oh, all right. So I can stop the show. All right. So let's say bye to everybody then.
Okay.
Thanks so much, everyone. Fun chat room. Brian, I'm going to lose my couple matchup. I'm winning by only 1 point. And this guy has 2 players left playing with like a couple periods to go. So I'm sure he'll get some shots and blocks.
I mean, there's really nothing I have to say to you about that. Like, I'm sad for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This show was just a breakdown
team
of how garbage my own team is. So.
I'm sorry, Brian. Okay. Well, anyway, let's say goodbye to everyone on that fun note.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ian, Adam. Everyone. You guys are great. And
thanks for being here. I don't know if, Edward, you made it to the end. Oh, I meant to drop it in the chat for you. I'm sorry.
Drop what?
The link.
To what?
When you teased it at the start of the show. I was going to just give it to Edward in the chat.
Oh, okay. Why is this like Eyes, Malkin, Brian? Oh, like trade. Oh, like maybe, he's in your division.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right,
yeah.
So you guys should talk. All right.
HMU.
See you, everyone. All right. So I'm going to stop.